Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was the son of Giovanni. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Prince of Viridian. The roar was a physical thing. It wasn't just sound. It was a pressure wave that vibrated through the concrete foundations of the Indigo Plateau, up through the soles of Leaf's boots, and settled deep in her bones. From her vantage point high in the stands, disguised among a sea of roaring fans and waving foam fingers, she had a perfect, sterile view of the battlefield below. It was a pristine green rectangle surrounded by a moat of digital ad space, a modern coliseum where teenagers became legends or footnotes. Today, she was hunting the former. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, ignored the screaming masses. She scanned the security details. G-men in their crisp, dark uniforms lined the exits, their faces impassive, but she could see the tension in the set of their shoulders. The League was taking no chances this year. Private security, likely funded by Sylph Company and the Devon Corporation, augmented the local forces, their uniforms a different shade of gray, their Pokemon partners, mostly stout Mac-Hoke and vigilant Arcanine, pacing at their sides. It was a fortress. And yet, the real threat wasn't trying to get in. He was already the main event. A bead of sweat traced a path down her temple, and she brushed it away with an impatient hand. The heat wasn't just from the midday Kanto sun beating down on the open-roof stadium. It was the heat of anticipation. Her gaze fixed on the western tunnel, a dark maw spitting manufactured fog and strobing lights. Any second now. Her mission, assigned by Lance himself, had sounded simple on paper: observe. Report. Do not engage. The subject was a boy named Ash. Just Ash. No last name. His official registration listed him as a native of Viridian City, a place known more for its shuttered gym and its proximity to the lawless wilds of Route 22 than for producing world-class trainers. Yet, in 6 short months, this Ash had blazed a trail through Kanto like a Typhlosion's eruption. He hadn't just beaten the gym leaders, he'd dismantled them. Faulkner's aerial acrobatics were grounded in minutes. Bugsy's swarm tactics were turned against him. Whitney's mill tank, the terror of Johto transfers and the bane of many a rookie, was apparently taken down in a single, decisive maneuver that the sobbing gym leader had refused to describe in her report. He was a prodigy. That was the public narrative. The League commentators spoke of him in breathless tones, calling him a once-in-a-generation talent. Leaf knew better. Talent didn't account for the resources. The perfectly bred Pokemon, the custom-tailored battle gear, the almost prescient strategies that seemed to anticipate an opponent's every possible move. Talent didn't explain how a 17-year-old from a backwater city had the tactical acumen of a veteran ranger and the financial backing of a small nation. No, this wasn't talent. It was training. The kind of rigorous, relentless, and brutally effective training that no normal institution provided. Lance's suspicion, and hers, was that this boy was the polished, public face of something new. Something organized. Something dangerous. And now, the announcer's voice boomed, synthesized and amplified to godlike proportions, entering from the west gate, the challenger who has taken the league by storm. The silent storm from Viridian City. Give it up for Ash. The roar of the crowd doubled. The name echoed, distorted and immense. Leaf leaned forward, her elbows on the railing, binoculars already pressed to her eyes. She zoomed past the cheering fans, past the beleaguered-looking referee, and focused on the figure emerging from the smoke. He wasn't large or physically imposing. He was lean, with a wiry strength that was apparent in his fluid, confident stride. He wore a simple, high-quality black jacket with sharp red accents, black cargo pants, and combat boots. No flashy cape or ridiculous hat. It was practical, efficient, and bespoke. His face, framed by a mess of black hair, was sharp-featured and, from this distance, utterly unreadable. He moved with an unnerving economy of motion, his presence sucking the air out of the stadium even as the crowd screamed for him. At his side, trotting with a matching confidence, was a Pikachu. Leaf adjusted the focus, her breath catching. Even from 100 yards away, she could see it. This was no ordinary Pikachu. It was sleek, its fur vibrant, its muscles lean and defined under its yellow coat. Its eyes, bright and intelligent, scanned the stadium not with the wide-eyed wonder of a pet, but with the cool appraisal of a soldier surveying a battlefield. The bond between them was visible even at this range, a quiet, constant hum of energy. They moved as one. His opponent was already waiting on the other side of the field. Damon, the son of some real estate magnate from Saffron City. He was everything Ash wasn't, loud, dressed in garish gold and white silks, and flanked by a massive, four-armed Macamp that was flexing for the crowd. Damon shouted something across the field, a taunt that was lost in the noise. Ash didn't even look at him. His attention was on the field itself, his eyes noting the position of the sun, the slight breeze rustling the perfectly manicured grass, the exact distance between the trainer boxes. He was processing data. Leaf felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She'd seen that look before, in the eyes of G-Men operatives right before a raid. It was the look of someone who had already won and was simply waiting for reality to catch up. The giant screen above the field flashed their faces. Damon's was a smug, sneering grin. Ash's was a mask of detached neutrality. The referee's flag went up. The quarter-finals of the Indigo League were about to begin. This will be a 3-on-3 battle, the referee declared. Let the battle begin. Damon threw his arm forward with theatrical flair. Show this nobody what real power looks like. Macamp, go. The Macamp roared and pounded its four fists together, the sound cracking through the air. It was a textbook power opening. Intimidate with a top-tier fighting type. Ash's hand moved to his belt. He didn't shout. He didn't make a grand gesture. He simply unclipped a pokeball and tossed it underhand. Umbreon. The stage is yours. The ball popped open in a flash of red light, and the sleek, nocturnal Pokémon landed silently on the grass. Its black coat seemed to drink the sunlight, and the golden rings on its body pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence. The crowd murmured. A dark type against a fighting type. It was a disadvantageous matchup, a rookie mistake. Leaf knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a statement. A dark type. You're forfeiting the first round, Viridian. Damon scoffed. Macamp, cross-chop. End this. The Macamp became a blur of gray muscle, rocketing across the field. Its lower set of arms glowed with furious energy as it closed the distance in seconds, ready to bring the full force of a super-effective move down on the smaller Pokémon. Ash didn't move. His voice cut through the air, calm and precise. Umbreon. Moonlight. Just as the Machamp's glowing fists were about to connect, Umbreon's rings flared with brilliant silver light. A pillar of soft, ethereal energy descended from the sky, bathing it in a healing glow. The cross-chop slammed into the field where Umbreon had been a split second before, kicking up a cloud of dirt and grass. What? Damon sputtered. Umbreon had used the flash of its own move as cover, its dark body becoming one with the newly cast shadows. It was now circling the bewildered Macamp, a silent predator. Where did it go? Damon yelled, his Pokémon looking around in confusion. Left flank, Ash said, his voice level. Feint attack. A flicker of movement in the Machamp's peripheral vision. It turned to counter, but it was too late. Umbreon materialized from the shadows, its body wreathed in dark energy, and slammed headfirst into the Machamp's knee joint. The bigger Pokémon roared in pain and surprise, stumbling. The attack wasn't powerful, but it was precise. Calculated. Leaf lowered her binoculars, her heart pounding. He wasn't playing by the rules of type advantage. He was using psychology. Misdirection. He'd intentionally chosen a Pokémon with a type disadvantage to create an expectation of weakness in his opponent's mind. The moonlight wasn't just for healing, it was a flashbang, a smokescreen. Don't just stand there, you idiot. Find it. Bulk up. Damon screamed, his composure already cracking. The Machamp roared and flexed, its muscles swelling as its attack and defense stats rose. It was the correct move, technically. Power through the harassment. But it was also stationary. He's baiting you, Ash murmured, almost to himself. To his Pokémon, he commanded, Confuse Ray. From the shifting shadows behind the Machamp, a pair of eerie, multicolored orbs shot out, striking the fighting type squarely in the back. The Machamp shuddered, its eyes glazing over with a dizzy, vacant look. It shook its massive head, trying to clear it. Now, Psychic, Ash commanded. Leaf's jaw tightened. Psychic. A move Umbreon couldn't naturally learn. This was a custom-tutored move, an expensive and time-consuming process. It was another piece of the puzzle, another sign of the immense resources at his disposal. Umbreon's golden rings glowed with an unsettling pink energy. It didn't lift the Machamp, that would take too much power. Instead, the psychic force subtly targeted the Machamp's inner ears, throwing its already confused senses into total disarray. The giant Pokémon staggered, clutching its head, its world spinning. Finish it, Machamp. Use Karate Chop on yourself if you have to. Just hit something. Damon shrieked, losing all semblance of strategy. The Machamp bellowed in frustration and swung its own fist wildly, clipping its own shoulder. Ash watched, his expression unchanged. The target is presented. Umbreon, Dark Pulse. Umbreon opened its mouth and unleashed a torrent of shadowy rings. The attack wasn't aimed at the Machamp's muscular torso, but at its legs, the same ones already weakened by the feint attack. The Dark Pulse slammed home, and the Machamp, its balance already gone, its mind in chaos, crashed to the ground with a thunderous boom that shook the stadium. It struggled for a moment, then lay still, swirls in its eyes. The referee's flag shot up. Machamp is unable to battle. Umbreon is the winner. A stunned silence fell over the stadium before erupting into a chaotic mix of boos for Damon and disbelieving cheers for Ash. Damon stood, his mouth agape, his face flushed with humiliation. He had been surgically dismantled. Not beaten, dissected. Leaf let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Ash had controlled every second of the engagement, from the first move to the last. He'd used a disadvantaged Pokémon to win without taking a single hit. This was beyond prodigy. This was mastery. Damon recalled his Machamp, his hand shaking with rage. You got lucky, Viridian punk. You won't be so lucky against this. Golem, let's crush him. He hurled his next Pokeball, and the massive, bipedal boulder Pokémon appeared, its rocky hide seeming to absorb the very light around it. A golem. A physical wall with devastating power. Ash recalled his Umbreon with a quiet word of praise, clipping the ball to his belt. He selected another. Sceptile. Your turn. The sleek, green reptile Pokémon materialized, its leaf blades sharp, its yellow eyes fixated on its opponent. Again, the crowd murmured. A grass type against a rock/ground type. A classic, advantageous matchup. It was the obvious, correct choice. Which is why Leaf knew it was a trap. Ash wouldn't rely on something as simple as a type advantage. He was playing a different game, and she was starting to understand the rules. The private suite was an oasis of sterile silence. Cool, recycled air hummed from unseen vents, a stark contrast to the furnace-like heat of the stadium. The walls were a neutral gray, the furniture minimalist and uncomfortable. It felt less like a victor's lounge and more like a holding cell. Ash stripped off his jacket, tossing it onto a chair. The faint scent of ozone and battle still clung to it. He ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair, the mask of cool indifference finally sliding from his face. It was replaced by a deep, weary tension that settled in his shoulders and jaw. The roar of the crowd, even muffled by a foot of soundproofed concrete and glass, was a dull, persistent headache. Pikachu hopped from his shoulder onto the central table, shaking its head as if to clear the same phantom noise. Pikachu, it chirped, its tone questioning. I know, Ash said, his voice low, stripped of the sharp, commanding tone he used on the field. It's a circus. But it's a necessary one. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the Indigo Plateau complex sprawled out, a monument to the commercialization of the Pokémon bond. Corporate tents, merchandise stalls, food courts. A machine designed to print money, all built on the backs of creatures who fought for the love of their trainers. A part of him, a part he kept locked down tight, despised it. Pikachu's ears drooped. It scampered across the table and nudged his hand with its head, a small, warm weight against his skin. Ash looked down, a flicker of genuine warmth in his eyes. He scratched the little Pokémon behind the ears, a familiar, grounding ritual. He'd liberated this Pikachu from a cage in one of his father's labs 2 years ago. It was supposed to be part of an experiment in mass-producing Pokémon with high electrical output, a living battery. Instead, it had become his confidant, his partner, the one living being in the world who knew both sides of him. Its defiance was his defiance. Its strength, nurtured through trust instead of torment, was the proof of his philosophy. A soft chime echoed through the room. A single, discreet red light began to blink on a small, encrypted communicator resting on the table. It was time to report. He took a deep breath, schooling his features back into a neutral mask. He picked up the device. It was heavy, cold, and utterly secure. No signal could be traced, no communication intercepted. It was his father's design. He thumbed the activation switch. The screen flickered to life, not with an image, but with a voice scrambler's wavering frequency graph. Then, the voice came through, digitally altered but unmistakably familiar. It was cold, precise, and held the weight of absolute authority. Status report. Not a question. A command. The quarterfinal is complete, Ash stated, his own voice now clipped and formal. Target eliminated. The semi-final is in 2 hours. I am aware of the schedule, the voice of Giovanni replied, a hint of impatience in its synthesized tone. I observed the transmission. Your methods are becoming theatrical. Silent storm. The commentators are indulging in fanciful narratives. This is not the purpose of the mission. Ash's jaw tightened. Theatrics build a following. Influence is a currency here. A narrative makes you memorable. A memorable winner commands loyalty. There was a pause. For a moment, Ash thought he had overstepped. Then, the cold voice returned. A logical, if distasteful, assessment. The loyalty of fools is still loyalty. But do not forget the primary objective. Your victory is a means to an end. It establishes a legitimate power base, a public foundation from which to operate when the old structure is dismantled. I haven't forgotten, Ash said. See that you don't. The energy readings from the stadium are promising, Giovanni continued, the subject shifting seamlessly. The ambient bioelectric and psychic energies generated by the battles, amplified by the emotional state of the crowd, are providing invaluable data. Ash felt a familiar chill. Project Chimera. The resonance frequencies are remarkably similar to the preliminary readings from the slumbering subject, Giovanni confirmed, ignoring Ash's utterance of the project's name. Each high-level battle is like a tuning fork, helping us refine the harmonic key. Your continued participation is accelerating the timeline significantly. So that was it. The Indigo League, this grand spectacle of human-Pokémon partnership, was nothing more than a giant energy farm for his father's ultimate ambition. The passion of the trainers, the roars of the crowd, the very spirit of the competition, all of it was being harvested, refined, and repurposed to help control a power that, according to the fragmented files Ash had managed to access, predated Arceus itself. A power his father believed he could tame and weaponize. The girl, Giovanni's voice cut through his thoughts. The one from Pallet Town. Leaf. Lance's new protégé. Ash's focus snapped back. She's here. In the stands. G-Men. She is more than an observer, Giovanni stated. She is a test. Lance does not trust your assent. He sent his best. Her presence legitimizes you. If you can operate under the nose of his top agent, you prove your own competence. I'm aware, Ash said, his gaze drifting back to the window, as if he could pick her out from the thousands of specks below. He remembered her from the gym circuit. He'd always been one step ahead of her, but she was always there, a persistent shadow. Her style was the polar opposite of his own, empathetic, adaptable, built on a foundation of almost symbiotic trust with her Pokémon. He respected it. He also knew it was a vulnerability. Do not underestimate her, Giovanni warned. Her ideals are her weapon. They inspire loyalty in others. It is a variable that is difficult to quantify. I'll manage the variable, Ash replied, a touch of his public arrogance creeping into his tone. See that you do. The board is watching. The old guard remains skeptical of you. They see you as a child playing at war. Your victory in this tournament will silence them. It will prove you are my son in more than just blood. It will prove you are the rightful heir. Do you understand what is at stake? I understand, Ash said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Heir to an empire of cruelty and fear. An empire he intended to burn to the ground from the inside out. Win, Giovanni commanded. It wasn't an encouragement. It was the setting of a condition. Then we proceed to the next phase. The line went dead. The red light on the communicator blinked out. The silence in the room returned, heavier than before. Ash stood motionless for a long moment, the device still in his hand. He was a prince in a gilded cage, and the bars were forged from his own father's ambition. Every victory, every step forward, was a step deeper into the darkness he swore he would one day destroy. Pika. Pikachu said softly, nudging his leg. Ash looked down, then set the communicator back on the table with a decisive click. He knelt, meeting his partner's gaze. He's using them all, buddy, he whispered, the formality gone, replaced by a raw, quiet anger. Every trainer, every Pokémon here. They're just fuel for his machine. Pikachu's ears flattened, and a low growl rumbled in its chest. Tiny sparks crackled at its cheeks. Ash placed a hand on its head, calming it. Easy. We have to play the part. We win the tournament. We gain the influence. We secure the assets. And then, we take it all from him. He stood up, his weariness replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. He walked back to his jacket and pulled a fresh pokeball from an inner pocket. His semi-final opponent was a psychic specialist from Saffron. A tough, but predictable, fight. He needed to prepare. But the sterile air of the suite was suffocating. He needed to move. Let's get some air, he said, clipping the ball to his belt. And maybe see what Lance's little spy is up to. Pikachu chirped in agreement, hopping back onto his shoulder as Ash slipped his jacket on. The mask was back in place. He was Ash, the silent storm from Viridian City. Arrogant. Unbeatable. And as he walked out of the door and into the quiet corridor, he was ready to play his part. The athlete's village was a pocket of tranquility carved out of the chaos. Manicured gardens, koi ponds, and pagoda-style rest areas were connected by quiet, gravel paths. Most competitors were either resting or celebrating, their voices a low murmur from behind the doors of their private quarters. Leaf preferred the open air. It helped her think. She stood under the shade of a weeping willow, its branches a curtain that partially obscured her from the main path. Her own Pokémon, a Venusaur, a Blastoise, and an Arcanine, were resting in their Pokeballs, recuperating from her own hard-fought, and ultimately losing, battle in the previous round. She'd made it to the top 16, a respectable finish. But her mission wasn't to win. It was to watch him. And what she had seen chilled her. The battle with Damon wasn't just a win, it was a psychological dismantling. The Sceptile round had been even more telling. Ash had used the obvious type advantage to make Damon overconfident, baiting him into using a predictable move, Golem's rollout. Then, Sceptile had used its agility not to dodge, but to use the Golem's own momentum against it, redirecting it with a precisely timed leaf blade to the side, sending the rolling behemoth crashing into the stadium wall. Then came the final round. Damon, desperate and humiliated, sent out his ace, a monstrous Rhydon with a hide like granite. The crowd expected a grass or water type. Ash sent out his Pikachu. Leaf still couldn't quite believe what she'd witnessed. It was madness. A tiny electric mouse against a 2,600-pound engine of destruction that was immune to its primary form of attack. Damon had laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. He'd ordered a horn drill, a one-hit KO move. But Ash was calm. He'd issued a single command, agility. Full field. Pikachu became a streak of yellow lightning. It didn't attack. It just ran. It circled the field, then crisscrossed it, its feet barely seeming to touch the ground. The Rhydon charged, but it was like trying to catch smoke. It thundered past, spun, and charged again, its frustration mounting. What is he doing? Leaf had whispered to herself. Then she saw it. A faint shimmer in the air around the Pikachu. A buildup of static electricity, but more than that. The friction of its movements against the dry air and the synthetic turf was creating a massive, invisible charge across the entire battlefield. Hold your ground. Use Earthquake. Damon had roared. The Rhydon stomped, and the entire stadium shook. But just as the shockwave erupted from the ground, Ash gave his real command. Now. Iron Tail. The horn. Pikachu, already in mid-air from a final burst of speed, used the upward thrust of the earthquake to launch itself even higher. Its tail glowed with the metallic sheen of an iron tail. The static charge that had saturated the air now arced from its body directly to the most prominent point on the battlefield, the Rhydon's drill horn, which acted as a lightning rod. A massive, uncontrolled bolt of ambient electricity, far more powerful than any thunderbolt, slammed down, momentarily stunning the Rhydon. In that split second of paralysis, Pikachu descended. Its glowing tail didn't just strike the horn, it struck the base, the one point where it connected to the skull, with the force of a blacksmith's hammer. A sickening crack echoed through the silenced stadium. The Rhydon froze, its eyes wide with shock, before its massive body crashed to the ground, unconscious. The battle was over. Ash hadn't used a single direct electric-type attack to win. He had used physics. Leaf shook her head, trying to clear the image. It was terrifyingly brilliant. Who was this guy? Impressive, wasn't it? The voice, cool and laced with a faint, mocking amusement, came from directly behind her. Leaf didn't startle. Years of training kept her body still, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She turned slowly, her hand resting casually near the pokeballs on her belt. It was him. Ash. Pikachu was perched on his shoulder, its dark eyes watching her with an unnerving intelligence. He was leaning against the trunk of the willow tree, arms crossed, as if he'd been there for minutes. You have a habit of sneaking up on people, Leaf said, her voice steady. Only people who are interesting enough to sneak up on, he replied, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Leaf, right? From Pallet Town. Professor Oak's latest prize pupil. I saw your match against the dragon trainer from Blackthorn. Your Venusaur's control of the terrain was impressive. You almost had him. He knew who she was. Of course he did. He'd done his homework. It was both flattering and deeply unsettling. Almost doesn't get you to the quarterfinals, she said, deflecting the compliment. No, he agreed, pushing off the tree and taking a step closer. He moved with a predator's grace, closing the distance but keeping just outside her personal space. It doesn't. But your strategy was sound. You forced him to fight on your terms. I respect that. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She had expected more arrogance, more of the detached coldness from the arena. Up close, his eyes were a deep, intense brown. They weren't cold, they were focused, like he was constantly analyzing everything he saw. Including her. Your strategy was unorthodox, she countered, choosing her words carefully. Pikachu versus Rhydon. Most trainers would call that suicide. Most trainers read the textbook, he shot back, his smile widening slightly. They memorize type charts and move sets. They think a battle is a math problem. It's not. It's a conversation. And most people's Pokémon only know how to shout. And yours whisper, she asked, raising an eyebrow. Mine understand the language, he said simply. Pikachu chirped in agreement from his shoulder, nuzzling his cheek. The affection between them was palpable, a stark contrast to the ruthless efficiency he displayed in battle. It was a contradiction she couldn't resolve. No one from Viridian trains like that, she stated, making it a soft accusation. The resources, the custom moves. That Umbreon knew psychic. The kind of tutoring that requires costs more than most people make in a year. He didn't flinch. His gaze remained locked on hers. My family is, well off. They believe in investing in talent. Who are they? She pressed. No one seems to know. A prodigy from Viridian with a blank past and a limitless bank account. It makes people curious. It makes the G-men curious. She watched him for any reaction, any flicker of fear or anger. There was nothing. Just a quiet intensity. He tilted his head, a thoughtful expression on his face. Let them be curious, he said, his voice dropping lower. It's better than being boring. Don't you think? He took another half step, and the space between them crackled with unspoken tension. You're not boring, Leaf. Far from it. That's why I'm talking to you instead of preparing for my next match. You see the board differently. Just like I do. Her breath hitched. He was doing it again. Disarming her with unexpected respect, drawing her into his orbit. This was more dangerous than any Pokémon battle. This charisma, this magnetic confidence, it was a weapon all its own. The board is one thing, she said, forcing herself to hold his gaze. The players are another. I believe in the bond between a trainer and their Pokémon. In trust. In partnership. What I saw in that arena today. It was brilliant, yes. But it was cold. It was calculated. Like you were moving pieces, not fighting alongside partners. For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor. A flicker of something dark and painful in his eyes. It was there and gone in an instant, so fast she almost thought she'd imagined it. His smile vanished, replaced by that unnerving neutrality. You see what you want to see, he said, his tone suddenly clipped. You think strength born from trust is the only kind of strength there is. It's a beautiful idea. A child's idea. The world is not a beautiful place. Before she could respond, he turned to leave. I have a match to win, he said over his shoulder, his voice once again the sharp, arrogant instrument of the arena. Enjoy the rest of the show. He walked away, his stride just as confident as when he'd entered the stadium. Pikachu glanced back at her one last time, its expression unreadable, before turning its head forward. Leaf stood frozen for a long moment, her mind racing. She had confronted him. And she had learned nothing and everything. He was a wall of contradictions, a ruthless tactician with an affectionate Pikachu, an arrogant prodigy who spoke of respecting her strategy, a charismatic boy with a shadow of profound pain in his eyes. The world is not a beautiful place. The words echoed in her mind. It wasn't the boast of a privileged kid. It sounded like the conviction of a survivor. Lance was right. There was more to Ash than met the eye. And she was beginning to fear that whatever secret he was hiding was far darker and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The tunnel was dark and cool. The roar of the crowd was a living entity ahead, a beast waiting to be fed. The concrete floor vibrated under Ash's boots with every new crescendo of noise. Strobing lights at the far end of the tunnel cast long, dancing shadows that writhed like ghostly serpents. He walked at a steady, unhurried pace. Pikachu was a warm, solid weight on his shoulder, its presence a silent anchor in the storm of sensation. He wasn't thinking about his opponent, a girl named Astrid whose team of psychic Pokémon relied on chaining future sight predictions. It was a complex strategy, but it was rigid. Once you understood the sequence, you could break the chain. He'd already mapped out 3 different ways to do it. No, he wasn't thinking about Astrid. He was thinking about the girl under the willow tree. Leaf. Giovanni had called her a variable. He was right. She wasn't like the other trainers. She didn't just see the moves, she saw the intent behind them. She saw the cost. It was cold. It was calculated. Her words had struck a nerve he hadn't known was still raw. Was he cold? Yes. He had to be. Warmth was a vulnerability his father had tried to beat out of him since he was a child. He was trained to see a battlefield as a set of probabilities, to see Pokémon as assets with specific strengths and weaknesses. It was the philosophy of Team Rocket. Disposable power. Overwhelming force. But Pikachu was not disposable. His Charizard, who he had raised from a terrified, abandoned Charmander, was not disposable. His Sceptile, his Umbreon, they were his. They were proof that his way was better. Strength through loyalty. Power forged in respect, not fear. He wasn't his father. He wouldn't be his father. And yet, to beat him, he had to use his father's methods. The cold calculation. The ruthless efficiency. The public persona of an untouchable prince. He had to become the monster to slay the monster. Leaf saw the mask, but she had also sensed the person underneath. Her challenge wasn't an accusation of cheating, it was an accusation of soullessness. And it stung because he feared she was right. He feared that in the process of building this weapon to use against his father, he was corroding his own soul. The announcer's voice, muffled by the tunnel, began his introduction. The undefeated prodigy, the master of strategy, the silent storm from Viridian City. Ash. The roar intensified, becoming a physical wall of sound at the tunnel's mouth. This was it. Another performance. Another step on the path he had chosen. He reached up and gave Pikachu a firm, reassuring scratch under the chin. Ready for the semifinals, buddy? Pika. The response was bright, unwavering, and full of fight. It was the one pure thing in his world. Ash took a final, deep breath, the scent of dust and electricity filling his lungs. He thought of his father's cold command, of Leaf's searching eyes, of the weight of the Crimson Empire he was sworn to both inherit and destroy. The pressure was immense, enough to crush a lesser man. But he was not a lesser man. He was the son of Giovanni. And he would not be crushed. He stepped out of the shadows and into the blinding light of the stadium, the roar of 100,000 people washing over him. His face was a mask of supreme, untouchable confidence. The Prince of Viridian had come to claim his due. Chapter 2, The Echoes of Lavender. The victory was hollow. It tasted like ash and ozone, a fine dust that coated his tongue and settled in his lungs. Ash stood on the victor's podium, bathed in a sun-bleached glare and the incandescent fury of a million flashbulbs. The Indigo League trophy, a garish gold-plated thing, was heavy in his hands, an anchor pulling him down into the roaring abyss of the crowd. They chanted his name, or the name they'd been given for him. Aishi. 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 It was a meaningless syllable, a rhythmic exhalation of air from thousands of strangers who thought they were witnessing a dream fulfilled. They had no idea they were watching a coronation. Pikachu, perched on his shoulder, endured the noise with a soldier's stoicism, its ears twitching but its posture rigid. It could feel his master's detachment, the vast, cold distance between the triumphant mask he wore and the man beneath. Lance stood beside him, the Kanto champion's cape a slash of brilliant crimson. He placed a heavy hand on Ash's shoulder, a gesture meant to convey pride and welcome to the upper echelons. Ash felt only the weight of scrutiny. Lance's smile didn't quite reach his Dragon Master eyes. They were sharp, analytical, and full of questions Ash had no intention of answering. A truly masterful performance, Ash, Lance boomed, his voice carrying over the din. Your strategies will be studied for years to come. You have a great future in the league. I have no future in your league, Ash thought, but he inclined his head in a gesture of humble gratitude. Thank you, champion. I was fortunate. Fortune favors the prepared, Lance countered, his grip tightening for a fraction of a second. A warning. I'm watching you. The ceremony was an eternity of forced smiles and meaningless platitudes. He shook hands with officials, posed for cameras, and endured the backslapping camaraderie of the Elite Four. They saw a gifted, if arrogant, boy. A new star to add to their constellation. They did not see the predator who had just walked into their house. Hours later, the noise finally faded, replaced by the suffocating silence of the suite he had been given, the champion's suite, an opulent prison of polished wood and panoramic views of a plateau now emptying of life. The trophy sat on a mahogany table, a grotesque paperweight. Ash ignored it. He stood by the window, watching the last of the service vehicles snake their way down the mountain pass, their headlights lonely pinpricks in the deepening twilight. He had won. He had fulfilled his father's directive. And he felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. The encrypted communicator on the table chimed, the single red light a malevolent eye in the gloom. He had been waiting for it. He picked it up, the cold metal a familiar weight. He thumbed the switch. The voice that came through was devoid of warmth, stripped of all emotion by the scrambler, yet it carried the chilling resonance of absolute power. It is done. Yes, Ash replied, his own voice flat. The Indigo Conference is won. A gaudy spectacle, Giovanni's voice crackled. But a necessary one. The underground elements will fall in line. The legitimate face of our organization now has a champion's credibility. The assets are secured. Assets. That's all they were to him. The influence, the public trust, the loyalty of a new generation of trainers who looked up to the silent storm. All of it was just another resource to be exploited. Your performance was adequate, the voice continued, the word a calculated insult. You allowed the final match to last 7 minutes longer than necessary. A display of hubris. You toyed with your opponent. I gave the crowd a show, Ash countered, his jaw tightening. It solidifies the narrative. Do not mistake your own vanity for strategy, Giovanni warned, a razor's edge in his tone. Sentiment is a disease. Now, for your next task. Your victory has earned you a place of honor, but true loyalty is forged in failure, the failure of others. Ash waited, his knuckles white around the device. Lavender Town, the voice said, and the name alone seemed to lower the temperature in the room. The Pokemon Tower. As you know, our previous operations there to secure the site ended in unacceptable losses. The local apparitions have proven resilient to conventional containment methods. The fools in my employ were routed by superstition. Ash knew the reports. Team Rocket had tried to take over the tower to use as a broadcasting station years ago. They were driven out, not by police, but by the vengeful spirits of Pokemon buried there. Grunts returned with stories of madness, of their own Pokemon turning on them. It was one of Giovanni's few outright failures in Kanto, a festering wound on his pride. The Sylph Company developed a prototype device, a specialized scope, that can render ethereal signatures into a tangible, visible spectrum, Giovanni explained. It was lost in the tower during the initial botched operation. The G-men have been unable to retrieve it. The local populace is too terrified to ascend. The mission is simple: infiltrate the tower, retrieve the Sylph scope, and return. You will be accompanied by a single research aide, Dr. Zager, who will provide technical analysis. He will meet you at the town's edge. It was a test. Not just of his skills, but of his nerve. A mission into the heart of a place his father's grunts feared to tread. A ghost story made real. Why now? Ash asked. The scope has been lost for years. There was a pause. When Giovanni spoke again, his synthesized voice seemed to hold a new, predatory interest. The data we harvested from your league battles has yielded fascinating correlations. The psychic energy generated by extreme emotional states, grief, rage, sorrow, creates a unique resonance. The Pokemon Tower is the largest single source of such ambient energy in the region. A veritable symphony of misery. The Sylph Scope is merely a key. The true prize is understanding the lock. Do you understand? Ash felt a cold dread wash over him. A symphony of misery. He was being sent to harvest ghosts, to quantify the pain of the dead for Project Chimera. I understand, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. You will depart at 2,200 hours. Use the unmarked transport I have arranged. Maintain absolute discretion. Do not fail me in this. Your championship means nothing if you cannot succeed where my grunts have failed. Prove you are above them. Prove you are my son. The line went dead. Ash stood in the darkness, the communicator clutched in his hand. He was not being sent to conquer a haunted house. He was being sent on a desecration. He looked at the trophy, its golden surface reflecting a distorted, shadowy version of his own face. The Prince of Viridian had won his crown. Now, he was being sent to rule over a kingdom of the dead. The flight was silent and swift. A nondescript, matte black helicopter without markings cut through the night sky, its rotors muffled by experimental noise-dampening technology. Ash sat alone in the small passenger bay, the lights of the cities below streaking past like scattered jewels on black velvet. He wore his tactical gear, the simple black jacket and cargo pants feeling more like a uniform than ever. His team was with him, their pokeballs a familiar weight on his belt. Pikachu dozed in his lap, a small, warm ball of fur, oblivious to the grim nature of their destination. They landed not in Lavender Town itself, but in a clearing in the woods a mile east. The moment the skids touched the damp earth, Ash was out, his senses on high alert. The air here was different. Heavy. Still. The typical night sounds of the forest, the chirping of cricketots, the hooting of noctowl, were conspicuously absent. There was only a profound, listening silence. A figure detached itself from the shadow of an ancient oak tree. He was a tall, unnervingly thin man in a pristine lab coat that seemed to glow in the moonlight. His silver hair was slicked back, and a pair of spectacles perched on his sharp nose. He held a silver briefcase. You are on time, Dr. Zager said, his voice as dry as autumn leaves. Punctuality is the courtesy of kings and a requirement for scientists. I am Dr. Zager. I know who you are, Ash said, unimpressed. Let's move. The town is that way. Indeed, Zager said, falling into step beside him. He moved with a strange, jointless grace. The ambient psychic energy is already palpable, even at this distance. Fascinating. It's like a low-frequency broadcast of pure sorrow. The boss was correct. This place is a gold mine of phenomenological data. Ash gritted his teeth. To this man, the grief that saturated this land was just a resource. He was the embodiment of his father's philosophy. Just be ready to do your job when I find the scope, Ash said, his tone sharp enough to cut. They reached the edge of town as the moon climbed to its zenith, casting long, skeletal shadows from the gabled roofs of the houses. Lavender Town was asleep, but it was not a peaceful slumber. It was the unnaturally deep sleep of a place trying to forget. Purple banners, faded and frayed, hung from lampposts, a permanent state of mourning. Every window was dark. No lights, no television flickers, no signs of life. It was a town holding its breath. And standing under one of those lampposts, bathed in its weak, violet glow, was a familiar figure. Ash stopped in the shadows of a funeral home, pulling Zager back with an arm across his chest. His eyes narrowed. It was Leaf. She wore a simple traveler's cloak, but he recognized her stance, the determined set of her shoulders. She was speaking to an old woman, one of the town's caretakers. The woman was shaking her head, her hands clasped in a prayer-like gesture, her face a mask of fear. Leaf listened patiently, her expression one of deep concern. A complication, Zager whispered, his eyes gleaming with academic interest. Lance's little agent. Her presence here is statistically improbable. Therefore, it is intentional. She's tracking me, Ash murmured. Or she was tipped off about rocket activity. Does she pose a threat to the mission? Zager asked. Ash watched as Leaf placed a reassuring hand on the old woman's arm before turning her gaze toward the looming silhouette that dominated the town's skyline, the Pokemon Tower. Not a physical one, Ash said. She's an observer. A variable. Stay out of her way. She's my problem. He waited until Leaf finished her conversation and began walking toward the tower alone. He gave her a 2-minute lead. Enough time for her to be the canary in the coal mine. Let's go, he said to Zager. And stay quiet. The walls here have ears. He moved like a phantom, using the deep shadows cast by the traditional, high-walled homes. Pikachu was awake now, its senses tingling with the oppressive atmosphere, its body pressed low against Ash's shoulder. They reached the base of the Pokemon Tower, a 7-story pagoda that seemed to claw at the night sky. It wasn't just a building, it was a tombstone for an entire town's worth of lost friends. The front doors were barred, but a side entrance, a heavy wooden door meant for groundskeepers, hung slightly ajar. Leaf's entry point. Ash pushed it open. A wave of cold, stagnant air washed over them, carrying the scent of dust, withered flowers, and something else. Something that smelled like old sadness. They were in. The first floor was a vast, open space filled with memorial plaques and gravestones arranged in neat rows. It was a place for humans to mourn their departed Pokemon. The air was thick with a silent, profound grief that was almost physical. Zager immediately pulled out a handheld device, his eyes wide behind his spectacles as he watched the readings. Incredible, he breathed. The sheer density of the psychokinetic residue, it's off the charts. The boss will be very pleased. Quiet, Ash hissed. He unclipped a pokeball from his belt. Crobat. Reconnaissance. The large, four-winged bat Pokemon emerged without a sound, its purple wings barely disturbing the stale air. It gave a soft chirp of acknowledgement and then vanished into the gloom of the upper floors, its echolocation a tool far more effective than sight in this place. Ash closed his eyes, his senses extending to his Pokemon, feeling what it felt, seeing a rough sonar map of the structure in his mind. He could feel Leaf's presence 3 floors up. She was moving cautiously. He could also feel others. Dozens of small, cold pockets of energy. The resident ghosts. The second floor is clear, he said, opening his eyes. Stairs are this way. Move. They ascended, their footsteps swallowed by the oppressive silence. The second floor was much like the first, more graves, more plaques. But here, the air began to stir. A light flickered overhead. A cold spot drifted past them like a puff of freezer air. Zager shivered, clutching his briefcase, his scientific detachment beginning to fray at the edges. Mere fluctuations in ambient temperature and electromagnetic fields, he muttered to himself. Keep telling yourself that, Ash said, not breaking his stride. The third floor was where the true haunting began. A thick, unnatural fog rolled down the staircase to meet them, clinging to the floor and swirling around their ankles. It was cold and damp, and it muffled sound, creating a disorienting sense of isolation. Ghastly, Ash identified instantly. They generate this fog to confuse their prey. Stay close. He unclipped another pokeball. Umbreon. You're on. The sleek black Pokémon landed silently, its golden rings pulsing with a soft, steady light, a beacon in the encroaching mist. It was immune to the psychic tricks the ghost types would employ. It pressed against Ash's leg, a reassuring presence. They moved into the fog. It was like walking through a dream. Shapes shifted at the edge of his vision. Whispers slithered through the air, formless and menacing. Get out, go, leave us. Zager was visibly trembling now, his knuckles white on the handle of his briefcase. Auditory hallucinations, a common response to infrasound produced by the apparitions. A giggle echoed from the right, high-pitched and cruel. Umbreon's head snapped in that direction, a low growl rumbling in its chest. From the left, a footstep. Ash spun, but saw nothing but swirling gray. He was being herded. And he wasn't the only one. Through his connection with Crobat, he could feel Leaf on the other side of the floor, experiencing the same thing. She was being pushed toward the center of the room. He grinned mirthlessly in the fog. The ghosts were trying to corner them both. He saw a flicker of movement ahead, the hem of a cloak disappearing behind a large memorial stone. Leaf. She was close. He could use this. Umbreon, feint attack, west, he commanded. Umbreon melted into the shadows, a black wraith in the gray fog. A moment later, a startled cry came from the other side of the room, followed by the clang of something metallic hitting the stone floor. A diversion. While Leaf was distracted, Ash moved in the opposite direction, toward the stairs. He heard her voice, sharp and angry, cut through the mist. Who's there? Show yourself. He didn't reply. He was already at the stairwell, Zager stumbling behind him. He had used her as bait, and the knowledge left a bitter taste in his mouth. But this was a mission, not a friendly competition. The fourth floor was worse. The fog was thinner, but the whispers were louder, more personal. They weren't just telling him to leave, they were plucking at his own memories. The cold disapproval in his father's eyes. The sting of failure after a particularly brutal training session. The faces of grunts he'd seen reassigned after failing a mission. The tower was feeding on his own darkness. Zager had gone pale, his breathing ragged. The psychic intrusion is significant, he stammered, clutching his head. They're projecting memories. Filter it, Ash snapped, shoving the man forward. Focus on the mission. He was filtering it too, but it was like trying to build a dam against the ocean. He relied on his training, on the cold, hard walls he had built around his own heart. He was a fortress, and these ghosts were testing the foundations. Crobat's sonar sense suddenly flared with a warning. Danger. Ahead. Large, aggressive entity. They rounded a corner and came face to face with it. A Jengar materialized out of the floor, its body a solid mass of purple shadow, its grin a terrifying rictus that stretched from ear to ear. Its eyes glowed with malevolent, red light. This was no mischievous ghastly. This was a predator. Ah, Zager squeaked, stumbling backward and falling in a heap. The Jengar cackled, a sound like scraping stones, and shot a shadow ball toward the cowering scientist. Umbreon, protect. Ash commanded. A green shield of energy shimmered into existence around Umbreon, absorbing the globe of dark energy with a deafening hiss. The Jengar looked surprised, its grin faltering for a second. Ash didn't give it time to recover. This wasn't a league battle, there were no rules. Crobat, Supersonic. Umbreon, Dark Pulse. Full power. From the ceiling, Crobat unleashed a disorienting wave of sound that made the Jengar stagger, clutching its head. Simultaneously, Umbreon fired a concentrated beam of dark rings. The attack slammed into the confused Jengar, not just hitting it, but pushing it backward, through the floorboards, sending it tumbling down to the level below. Ash hadn't defeated it, he'd removed it from the board. Efficient. Ruthless. He hauled Zager to his feet. Can you walk? The scientist nodded shakily, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Remarkable, your command synergy is flawless. Move, Ash ordered, pushing him toward the next flight of stairs. As they ascended, he heard the sounds of a battle from the floor below. The shriek of the Jengar, the roar of a powerful Pokémon, the clear, commanding voice of Leaf shouting orders. She was fighting the Jengar he had just displaced. A part of him felt a pang of guilt. Another part, the cold, calculating part his father had nurtured, simply noted that she was once again running interference for him, whether she knew it or not. The 5th and 6th floors were a blur of cold spots and sorrowful specters, but none were as aggressive as the Jengar. They were shades, echoes of pain that drifted through the halls, their silent cries absorbed by the very walls. The air grew colder, the pressure more intense, with each step they took. Crobat's sonar showed the final staircase, leading to the 7th floor. The top. And at the top, a vortex. A screaming nexus of energy that made his teeth ache. We're here, Ash said, his voice low. The top floor was a single, large chamber. Unlike the floors below, it was not a graveyard. It was a sanctuary. The floor was covered in purified sand, and simple charms hung from the rafters. A large, ceremonial bell stood in the center. This was the place where the spirits were meant to find peace. But there was no peace here. In the far corner of the room, a whirlwind of purple energy and raw, untamed grief spun violently. It was a psychic storm, and at its heart was the spectral image of a Pokémon. A Marowak. It clutched a bone club, its empty eye sockets burning with a rage so profound it was a physical force. It let out a silent scream, a wave of pure psychic anguish that cracked the very air, sending Zager to his knees, clutching his head and moaning. Ash gritted his teeth, the psychic scream tearing at the edges of his consciousness. This was the source of the tower's pain. The legend of the Marowak killed by Team Rocket, leaving behind an orphan cub one. This was its spirit, trapped here for years, its rage and sorrow poisoning the entire tower. And clutched in its spectral, non-corporeal claws, glowing with a faint, technical light, was the Sylph Scope. Footsteps pounded up the stairs behind them. Leaf burst into the room, her Venusaur at her side. She saw the spectral Marowak, her eyes widening in shock and pity. Then she saw Ash and Zager. Her expression hardened. You, she breathed, her hand going to a poke ball on her belt. Team Rocket. I knew it. Stay back, Ash warned, not taking his eyes off the ghost. You don't know what you're dealing with. I'm dealing with grave robbers, she shot back. And a spirit that needs to be at peace. Venusaur, use sleep powder. The large plant Pokémon shook its flower, releasing a cloud of sparkling spores. They drifted toward the Marowak, but the psychic vortex around the spirit simply disintegrated them, blowing them away like dust. The Marowak let out another silent scream, and the psychic pressure intensified. Venusaur groaned and took a step back, its own mind under assault. It's no good. Leaf cried. Its rage is too strong. As if on cue, the heavy tread of combat boots echoed from the stairwell. 4 Team Rocket grunts in standard black uniforms and body armor stormed into the room. They were armed with strange, pronged rifles. Spirit shackles, Zager identified, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. Prototype containment technology. The boss insisted on a backup team. "Sir," the lead grunt said, saluting Ash. "We detected the primary target. We are ready to execute capture protocol on your command." Leaf stared, her face a pale mask of disbelief. They saluted him. They called him, "Sir." The truth slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. The prodigy from Viridian, the arrogant champion, was a rocket commander. "Capture it?" Leaf whispered, horrified. "You can't. It's a grieving spirit, not a specimen." "Orders are orders," the grunt sneered at her. "The boss wants it. Aim." The four grunts raised their rifles, the prongs crackling with a sickly yellow energy designed to ensnare and contain ethereal beings. The Marowak spirit thrashed, its rage reaching a fever pitch. It sensed the new threat, the same scent of cruelty and ambition that had killed it years ago. This was the test. Giovanni's test of loyalty and ruthlessness. The order was clear: capture the asset. Succeed where others had failed. Prove he was his father's son. Ash looked at the grunts, ready to inflict more pain on a creature that had known nothing but. He looked at Zager, practically drooling at the prospect of the data. He looked at Leaf, her face a mixture of betrayal and desperate appeal. And he looked at the Marowak, a being so consumed by grief it had become a monster. He saw the monster his father wanted to create. And he saw the monster he was being shaped into. "No," Ash said, his voice quiet but absolute. The lead grunt blinked. "Sir." "I said no," Ash repeated, his voice gaining a hard, dangerous edge. He turned to face them, his eyes blazing with a cold fire the grunts had only ever seen in one other man. "Stand down. That's an order." "But, our orders come directly from the boss," the grunt protested. "He said to secure the asset at all costs. And I am the commander on this field," Ash snapped. "Your orders come from me now. Stand down." The grunts hesitated, looking at each other, caught between the immediate, terrifying authority of the boy in front of them and the distant, absolute authority of Giovanni. The Marowak, sensing the internal conflict, shrieked again, lashing out with a wave of psychic energy. It slammed into the grunts, sending them staggering back, their rifles clattering to the floor. "Incompetent fools," Ash snarled. "Pikachu, thunderbolt on their weapons. Disable them." Pikachu didn't hesitate. A perfectly aimed bolt of lightning erupted from its cheeks, striking the fallen rifles. They sparked violently and then went dark, their prototype technology fried. The grunts stared in shock, then in fear. Ash had just openly defied a direct order and disarmed them. This was treason. You're dead," the lead grunt stammered. "The boss will have your head for this." "Get out," Ash said, his voice a low growl. "Before I change my mind about letting you walk out of here at all." The grunts, terrified, scrambled to their feet and fled down the stairs. Zager watched them go, his face ashen. "You have just signed your own death warrant," he whispered. "The boss does not tolerate defiance." "My father tolerates results," Ash shot back, turning his attention back to the raging spirit. He didn't know why he'd done it. It was an instinct, a rebellion that had been simmering for years finally boiling over. He would not be the man who put another soul in one of his father's cages. Leaf was staring at him, her expression unreadable. Betrayal, confusion, shock, and something else. A sliver of hope. He had to end this. But how? Leaf was right, conventional attacks were useless. But he had seen something. When he looked at the Marowak, he didn't just feel its rage. He felt its loss. A deep, aching void. It was a feeling he recognized. An instinct, primal and deep, stirred within him. A warmth spreading from his chest, a low hum of energy that had nothing to do with his Pokémon. He'd felt it before, in fleeting moments. A flicker of preternatural awareness in a battle, a sudden understanding of his Pokémon's intent. He never understood it. But now, it was surging, demanding to be used. Aura. He took a step forward, raising an empty hand. Ash, no. Leaf cried. It'll tear you apart. He ignored her. He closed his eyes, shutting out the world, shutting out the tactical part of his brain, and focused on the feeling. The warmth. He reached out, not with his hand, but with his spirit. He didn't try to command the Marowak. He didn't try to soothe it. He shared. He let the walls around his heart crumble, just for a moment, and offered up a memory he kept buried deeper than any other. He was a child, no older than 7. His father had given him a Riolu, a creature that could feel emotions, a perfect partner. They had been inseparable. But Giovanni had deemed the bond a weakness. The Riolu was too empathetic, too gentle. It was making his son soft. One day, Ash had come home from his tutors to find the Riolu gone. It was unsuitable, his father had said, his voice devoid of any emotion. It has been reassigned. You will be given a Pokémon that encourages strength, not sentiment. The pain of that loss, the helpless, searing grief of a child whose best friend had been stolen from him, was a wound that had never truly healed. He pushed that memory, that raw, undiluted pain, out into the room. He offered it to the Marowak. I know your pain. I understand. The psychic storm around the Marowak faltered. The silent screaming stopped. The raging vortex of purple energy slowed, its violent edges softening. The ghost turned its burning eyes from the memory Ash projected to Ash himself. For the first time, it wasn't seeing an intruder or a threat. It was seeing a kindred spirit. The image of Ash's lost Riolu, and the spectral image of a small cub one, overlapped in the air between them for a heartbreaking second. A wave of profound, shared sorrow washed through the room, a silent understanding that transcended words, life, and death. The Marowak's form began to soften, its furious energy dissipating. The rage was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness, and then, finally, by acceptance. Its spectral body grew faint, translucent. It looked at Ash one last time, a silent gesture of gratitude, before its form dissolved completely, leaving behind only a gentle shimmer in the air that quickly faded. The oppressive pressure in the room vanished. The air was light. The silence was no longer menacing, it was peaceful. A small, metallic object fell from where the spirit had been, clattering softly on the wooden floor. The Sylph Scope. Ash swayed on his feet, the sudden psychic silence deafening. The effort had drained him, leaving him feeling hollowed out. Pikachu scrambled from his shoulder and nudged his leg, chirping with concern. He took a deep, shuddering breath and bent down, picking up the scope. Mission accomplished. Sort of. He turned. Zager was staring at him, his scientific curiosity having completely overpowered his fear. What was that? He breathed, his eyes wide. That was not a Pokémon move. The energy signature was, human. A biometric phenomenon of unprecedented scale. The data is revolutionary. He was already typing frantically into his handheld device. The resonance frequency of its pacification, it's identical to the harmonic field the boss theorized could pacify the slumbering subject. Not rage, but empathy. This changes everything. Ash's blood ran cold. He hadn't just defied an order. He had just handed his father the key he'd been searching for. Not a weapon to control the calamity, but a method to potentially soothe it, to approach it, to harness it in a way he had never thought possible. Ash. He looked up. Leaf stood by her Venusaur, her face pale, her eyes wide with 1,000 questions. The G-Men agent, the rival, the girl from Pallet Town, all of it was stripped away. She had seen it all. His command of Team Rocket. His open defiance. An impossible power. An act of profound, heartbreaking empathy. The two halves of him, the ruthless commander and the boy with a broken heart, lay exposed on the floor of the silent tower. And she had seen them both. Chapter 3, The Saffron Gambit. The debriefing was not a conversation. It was a verdict. Ash stood in the center of a circular, sterile white room, 100 feet beneath the surface of Viridian City in a bunker that did not officially exist. The only feature was a single, holographic projector. It hummed to life, casting a three-dimensional effigy of Giovanni into the air. He wasn't depicted sitting behind his desk, but standing, an imposing figure of shadow and authority, his face obscured as always. The synthesized voice that filled the room was colder than the recycled air. You defied a direct order. The statement was flat, absolute. You engaged and neutralized my personnel. You unilaterally released a valuable research asset. Ash met the hologram's blank gaze without flinching. His defiance in the tower had been an instinct, a spontaneous rebellion. Now, facing the consequences, his mind was cold, his resolve like forged steel. He had made his move. He would not apologize for it. I secured the objective, Ash stated, his voice ringing with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Your grunts were tactically inept. They alerted the target and were about to trigger a catastrophic psychic event. I neutralized the threat they posed to the mission. You were the threat to the mission, the voice boomed, a rare flicker of digital rage. Your orders were to capture the specimen. My orders were to retrieve the Sylph scope, Ash countered, his voice sharp. Which I did. And in the process, I provided Dr. Zager with something far more valuable than a caged ghost. I gave him the key. The hologram was silent for a beat. The anger receded, replaced by a chillingly pragmatic curiosity. The data from Zager's report is compelling, Giovanni conceded, the shift in tone more unnerving than the rage. Your empathic pacification, as he calls it. A biometric event of unprecedented potential. It suggests a new path for Project Chimera. A path of subjugation through harmony, rather than brute force. More efficient. More permanent. Ash felt a knot of ice form in his gut. His act of compassion had been twisted into a new, more insidious weapon. He had shown his father a better way to shackle the world. Your methods are unorthodox. Sentimental. Dangerous, Giovanni continued. But the results speak for themselves. This, however, does not absolve you of your insubordination. Defiance is a cancer. It must be excised. You require a lesson in consequence. Ash braced himself. A demotion? Reassignment? A session with one of the re-education specialists? Saffron City, Giovanni said, and the name hung in the air like a death sentence. It remains a thorn in my side. A bastion of psychic power that has made our operations in the city's financial sector impossible. Sabrina, its so-called leader, is an arrogant child who believes her gift makes her a queen. She has refused all overtures. She has psychically scarred every agent I have sent to negotiate with her. This was it. The impossible task. A suicide mission disguised as a promotion. Your new assignment is to break her, Giovanni commanded. Break her hold on the city. Neutralize her as a threat. How you do it does not matter. Use an army. Use your empathy. Raise the city to the ground for all I care. Just remove her from the board. Succeed, and your transgression in Lavender Town will be overlooked. Fail, and you will learn the true meaning of the word reassigned. The hologram flickered and died, plunging the room into near darkness, lit only by the faint blue glow of the cooling projector. Ash stood alone in the silence, the weight of the command pressing down on him. This wasn't a test of loyalty. It was an execution. Giovanni was pointing him at an unbreakable wall, fully expecting him to shatter against it. A grim smile touched Ash's lips. His father saw only two outcomes, a broken Saffron, or a broken son. He had no intention of providing him with either. He would give him a third option. He would take Saffron City, but he would do it his way. And when he was done, it wouldn't belong to Giovanni. It would belong to him. Saffron City was a symphony of noise and light, a frantic, beating heart of commerce and technology that never slept. Skyscrapers of glass and steel clawed at a sky hazy with pollution and ambition. The iconic magnet train shot through the city's core on its elevated track, a silver serpent hissing with electromagnetic energy. Billboards, dozens of stories high, displayed holographic ads for Sylph Company products and Devon Corporation innovations. It was the glittering, chaotic hub of Kanto's economy. And all of it, every stock trade, every data transfer, every commuter's frantic rush, happened under the watchful, psychic gaze of one person, Sabrina. From a penthouse suite in a nondescript corporate tower that his father's organization maintained, Ash watched the city breathe. For 3 days, he had done nothing but watch. He had a full team at his disposal, a dozen of his father's most loyal, and most ruthless, agents. They were his guards and his executioners, waiting for him to fail. He ignored them. He sat in the dark, a map of the city's infrastructure spread across a table, and he listened. Not with his ears. He extended that strange, nascent aura sense, the one that had flared to life in the Pokemon Tower. It was weak, undisciplined, but here, in a city saturated with psychic energy, it was like putting his ear to a drum. He could feel her. Sabrina. She wasn't a single point of light. She was a web, a vast, intricate network of psychic power that blanketed the entire metropolis. Her consciousness was intertwined with the city's nervous system. She could hear the thoughts of 1,000 stockbrokers at once, feel the collective anxiety of 1,000,000 commuters, see through the eyes of every psychic acolyte who served her in the gyms and dojos scattered throughout the city. It was a staggering display of power. Attacking her directly, as his father's other agents had tried, was like trying to punch the ocean. But as Ash listened, he felt the strain. The web was stretched taut. Maintaining this level of omniscience, even for a prodigy like Sabrina, required immense, constant focus. It was a dam holding back a flood of information, and he could feel the hairline cracks in its foundation. Her power wasn't infinite, it was amplified. Her acolytes, the dozens of junior psychics, acted as relays, nodes in her network that gathered and filtered information. That was her strength. And it was her weakness. He traced a line on the map with his finger, from the Saffron power plant on the city's outskirts to the central hub of the magnet train line. Then he drew another line, to the Sylph Company headquarters, the city's technological nexus. Her power is tied to the city's infrastructure, he murmured to himself. Pikachu, nibbling on a piece of apple on the desk beside him, looked up, its ears perked. She doesn't just watch the city, she feels its electrical and digital pulse. If that pulse becomes a scream, she'll be deafened. He tapped the map. A plan, audacious and terrifyingly risky, was forming in his mind. He wouldn't attack her. He would give her a panic attack. A city-sized one. He stood and walked into the adjoining room, where his team was assembled. 12 agents, men and women with cold eyes and the predatory stillness of apex hunters. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man named Stryker with a jagged scar bisecting his eyebrow, rose to his feet. "Do you have a plan, Commander?" Stryker asked, his tone laced with a barely concealed skepticism. They had all heard about Lavender Town. They saw him as a sentimental fool who had gotten lucky. "I do," Ash said, his voice cutting through the quiet conversations. "It's a 2-phase operation. Phase 1 begins in 1 hour." He tossed a set of data chips onto the table. "These contain your targets. Phase 1 is a coordinated electronic and physical assault on Saffron's primary infrastructure." The agents looked at each other, then at the chips. Stryker picked one up and slotted it into a datapad. His eyes widened slightly as he read the target list. This is, the city's main power grid, the magnet train control nexus, and the central communications tower, he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. This is not a surgical strike. This is civic sabotage on a massive scale. Correct, Ash said, his gaze sweeping over them. Your teams will be equipped with specialized Pokémon. Magnemite and Magneton for EMP generation at the power plant. A Porygon for digital infiltration of the train network. Your objective is not to destroy, but to disrupt. Overload the grid. Scramble the train's scheduling matrix and trigger emergency braking protocols across the entire line. Blackout communications. I want every light in this city to flicker. I want every train to screech to a halt. I want every data stream to corrupt. You will create chaos. Coordinated, citywide, absolute chaos. A slow grin spread across Stryker's face, erasing his skepticism. This was not the plan of a sentimental fool. This was the work of a true anarchist. This was a language Team Rocket understood. And Phase 2, Commander? Phase 2, Ash said, a cold gleam in his eyes, is my job. While you are giving the city a seizure, I am going to walk into the Saffron Gym and have a conversation. Lance's voice was a low growl of thunder over the secure comms line. Let me be clear, Leaf. You are grounded. Your unauthorized excursion into the Pokémon Tower, a known rocket hotspot, was reckless. Your report is confusing at best. You are to remain at the Celadon G-Men headquarters until this is sorted out. Leaf stood on the balcony of her assigned quarters, gripping the railing so hard her knuckles were white. Below, the lush, perfumed air of Celadon City felt a world away from the grit and grief of Lavender Town. Sir, with all due respect, I saw him, she argued, her voice tight with frustration. I saw Team Rocket grunts salute him. He's one of them. And he's making a move on Saffron. All our intel points to it. Intel points to a new league champion making a courtesy visit to the Saffron Gym, Lance countered tiredly. The official story is that he's interested in learning more about psychic Pokémon. It's thin, I know. But without concrete proof, the Council's hands are tied. We cannot move on a celebrated public figure based on your field hunch. It's more than a hunch, she insisted. I saw what he did in the tower. The way he calmed that spirit, it wasn't a trick. It was real. He's dangerous, Lance, but not in the way we thought. He's a contradiction, and that makes him unpredictable. And that unpredictability is why you will stay put, Lance said, his tone final. I have a team monitoring Saffron. If Ash so much as jaywalks, I'll know. Stand down, Agent. That's an order. The line went dead. Leaf slammed her hand against the railing. Grounded. Benched. While the most dangerous person she had ever met was about to do something to Saffron City. She didn't trust the G-Men team on the ground. They were looking for a battle, for an army of grunts in black. They weren't looking for a boy who could win a war with a conversation. She stood there for a long moment, the scent of Celadon's gardens cloying and suffocating. Her Venusaur's pokeball felt warm against her belt. An order was an order. But she had seen the look in Ash's eyes. The cold calculation mixed with a profound, hidden pain. Whatever he was planning, it wasn't going to be simple. And then it happened. The lights of the Celadon skyline flickered. Far to the east, in the direction of Saffron, the constant, hazy glow on the horizon strobed violently, then dimmed. Her comms unit crackled with static. A chorus of alarms began to rise from the city below as automated systems registered a massive power surge, then a catastrophic failure, from the neighboring metropolis. On the balcony, a news drone, programmed to report on major events, whirred to life and shot eastward. Leaf looked at her comms unit, now dead. She looked at the darkening sky over Saffron. To hell with orders. She recalled her conversation with Ash under the willow tree. You see the board differently. Just like I do. He had been challenging her. Daring her to keep up. She ran back inside, grabbing her gear. She was done playing by the rules. It was time to start thinking like him. The chaos was beautiful. From his vantage point, Ash watched Saffron City have its nervous breakdown. The power grid flickered, plunging entire districts into momentary darkness before emergency generators kicked in with a dull roar. The magnet train, a symbol of the city's relentless progress, was frozen on its tracks, its silver cars sitting inert, its passengers trapped. Communication signals vanished, replaced by a wall of white noise. The city's pulse, its constant hum of energy and data, had become a frantic, stuttering arrhythmia. He could feel the effect it had on Sabrina's psychic web. The dam had broken. She was being flooded with a tsunami of pure, raw panic from a million sources at once. The fear of being trapped in a dark skyscraper. The claustrophobia of a stalled train car. The anger of a stockbroker whose multi-million-dollar trade had just vanished into the ether. It was too much. Her web, once a precision instrument, was now a tangled, shrieking mess. She was forced to pull her consciousness back, to retreat from the overwhelming noise, to focus all her power on just holding her own mind together. The Saffron Gym was no longer the center of an omniscient network. It was just a fortress under siege. Phase 1 is complete, Commander, Stryker's voice crackled over a short-range, shielded radio. All teams are withdrawing to the rendezvous. We're dark. Acknowledged, Ash said. Good work. He turned from the window. Pikachu leaped onto his shoulder, its cheeks crackling with nervous energy. It's time, he said. He walked out of the suite and took the elevator down to the street. The city was a madhouse. People were pouring out of buildings, shouting into dead phones. Car horns blared. The air was thick with anxiety. It parted before him. His calm, confident stride was an island of purpose in a sea of chaos. No one noticed the boy walking toward the eye of the storm. The Saffron Gym was an imposing, pagoda-like structure, but now its gold trim seemed dull, its presence diminished. The two psychic acolytes guarding the door were pale, their hands pressed to their temples, struggling against the psychic backlash of the city's panic. They barely registered Ash as he walked past them and pushed open the heavy doors. The interior was a maze of training rooms and meditation chambers. Usually, the air would be thick with psychic energy, a pressure that could make a normal person dizzy. Now, it was thin, a dull headache instead of a crushing weight. The few acolytes he passed were curled on the floor, groaning, their minds overwhelmed. He was invisible to them. He followed the faint, thrumming pulse of Sabrina's power to the heart of the gym, the main battle arena. It was designed to look like a throne room. A single, high-backed chair sat on a raised dais, overlooking a battlefield. And in the chair sat Sabrina. She was younger than he expected, perhaps his age. She wore a simple, severe dress, and her black hair was cut in a sharp, geometric style. Her eyes were closed, her face a mask of intense concentration. She wasn't the serene, untouchable queen of legend. She was a girl desperately trying to keep her head above water. Her iconic Kadabra stood beside her throne, not in a battle stance, but with its spoon held up, glowing with psychic energy, trying to form a protective barrier around its master. Ash stopped at the edge of the battlefield, the silence of the room a stark contrast to the pandemonium outside. He waited. After a long minute, her eyes snapped open. They were not glowing. They were dark, fathomless pools of exhaustion and fury. They fixed on him. You, she hissed, her voice a strained whisper, but the psychic force behind it made the air vibrate. You did this. You plunged my city into chaos. I got your attention, Ash corrected, his voice calm and level. He took a step onto the battlefield. The Kadabra growled, its eyes flashing, but Sabrina held up a hand, stopping it. "You have it," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You walk into my sanctum, a coward hiding behind citywide vandalism. You think you can demand an audience with me?" "I didn't come to demand," Ash said, taking another step. "I came to talk. To one prodigy trapped in a gilded cage from another." That gave her pause. The fury in her eyes was joined by a flicker of surprise. "You know nothing about me. I know that from the time you could bend a spoon with your mind, you've been this city's weapon and its shield," he said, his voice resonating with an empathy he didn't have to fake. "Your father, the old master of the fighting dojo, pushed you, honed you, turned you into the ultimate defense against Team Rocket. The League celebrated you. The city relies on you. And you are utterly, completely alone, drowning in the thoughts of a million people who see you not as a person, but as a utility." She stared at him, her mask of anger cracking. He wasn't attacking her. He was describing her life. "My father," he continued, the word tasting like poison, "would have sent an army. He would have battled you, broken your Pokemon, and then broken your mind. He would have put you on a leash and called you his. He sees your power as a resource to be controlled." He stopped, now only 20 feet from her dais. "I see it as a force to be respected. I don't want your servitude, Sabrina. I want your partnership." Sabrina laughed, a short, sharp, bitter sound. "And what do you offer, son of Giovanni, besides a different leash?" So, she knew. Of course she did. In a city of a million minds, a secret like that was impossible to keep from her. "I know who you are," she confirmed, her voice regaining some of its strength. "I've felt your father's agent sniffing at my walls for years. You are just the latest, most ambitious attack dog he has sent." "I am not his dog," Ash said, his voice dropping, becoming dangerously quiet. "I am his successor. And my empire will not be built on fear and servitude. It will be built on loyalty and strength. The strong should rule, Sabrina. We are the strong. But not alone. Not as isolated kings and queens in our own little prisons." He held her gaze, his own intensity matching hers. "Giovanni offers you slavery. The League offers you a gilded cage where you perform tricks for their approval. I am offering you a throne. In my organization, you would not be a gym leader. You would not be a weapon. You would be a queen, an equal partner in shaping the world as we see fit. Free to use your power as you choose, with the resources of a global enterprise at your back. All I ask for is your allegiance. And Saffron City as our shared capital." The doors to the gym burst open. A squad of G-men, armed and ready, stormed in, led by a panting, determined Leaf. Her Blastoise was at her side, its cannons primed. "It's over, Ash." Leaf yelled, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Surrender now." They froze, taking in the scene. There was no battle. No army of grunts. Just a boy standing before a queen on her throne, in the middle of a silent, intense negotiation. They had expected a war zone. They had walked into a summit. Sabrina's gaze flickered to Leaf and the G-men, then back to Ash. A slow, calculating smile touched her lips for the first time. The chaos outside, the G-men inside, she finally understood. It wasn't just an attack. It was a demonstration. He had shown her not only his power to disrupt, but his power to command attention, to make the world dance to his tune. "You are more than just your father's son," she said softly, a newfound respect in her voice. She rose from her throne, her power beginning to coalesce around her again, no longer frantic, but calm and focused. "You are more ambitious. And far more interesting." She looked at Leaf. "G-men. You are trespassing. My city is experiencing technical difficulties. This boy is a guest, here to discuss a potential sponsorship for the gym. Now, leave." Leaf stared, dumbfounded. He crippled your city. We have him. You have nothing, Sabrina said, her eyes beginning to glow with their familiar, terrifying power. The air grew thick and heavy. This is Saffron City. My city. And my word is law. Get out. The G-men took an involuntary step back, feeling the immense psychic pressure. Leaf held her ground, but her Blastoise shifted nervously. She looked at Ash, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. A nod that said, "You lose." Leaf's shoulders slumped in defeat. She had been outmaneuvered. Outplayed. She had brought a sword to a chess match. With a gesture of disgust, she recalled her Blastoise and turned, herding the confused G-men out of the gym. The great doors boomed shut, leaving Ash and Sabrina alone once more. A bold gambit, Sabrina said, descending from her dais. You risked everything on the chance that I would listen. I risked everything on the chance that you were tired of being a tool, Ash corrected. She stopped before him, her dark eyes searching his. Your offer is intriguing. A partnership. Autonomy. She paused. I accept. On one condition. Name it. This alliance is with you, she said, her voice resonating with power. Not with your father. Not with Team Rocket. With you, the man who will build a new empire. Should you fail, should you bend the knee to him, our deal is void. And I will personally tear your mind from your skull. Ash met her gaze, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. I wouldn't have it any other way, he said. He extended his hand. Sabrina looked at his hand, then back at his face. She did not take it. Instead, she gave a slight, regal nod. The city's systems will be back online within the hour. My sponsorship by your anonymous benefactor will be announced by morning. You have your victory, Ash. Do not waste it. Deep in the subterranean lab, Dr. Zager watched a bank of monitors, his face rapturous. The psychic scream of Saffron City had been a feast. The energy readings were off the charts, orders of magnitude greater than anything they had collected from the Indigo League. It's incredible, he whispered, watching the data stream. The sheer volume of raw, chaotic psychic energy, it's more than we could have hoped for. A specific monitor, linked to a seismograph deep within the rock of Silver, began to flash red. The needle trembled, then jumped violently, scratching out a frantic, jagged line. A low, resonant hum echoed through the lab's speakers, a sound from the deep places of the world. Resonance, Zager breathed, his eyes wide. The calamity, it's reacting. It's feeding on the chaos. He looked at another screen, which displayed a live, encrypted feed of Ash walking out of the Saffron Gym, a silhouette against the recovering lights of the city. Giovanni's gamble had paid off in a way even he couldn't have predicted. The boy wasn't just a tool for conquest. He was a walking catalyst. Everywhere he went, he generated the precise emotional and psychic turmoil needed to awaken the slumbering god his father sought to master. Zager smiled, a thin, predatory expression. The Prince of Viridian had just won a city. And in doing so, he had taken one giant leap closer to ending the world. Chapter 4, The Fires of Cinnabar. The victory in Saffron was a silent earthquake that sent tremors through the Kanto underground. Giovanni's public statement was a masterpiece of corporate propaganda, a new, generous sponsorship of the Saffron Gym by a Viridian-based private investment group, fostering a new era of cooperation. To the world, Ash had succeeded where diplomats had failed, a charismatic prodigy bridging the gap between a reclusive gym leader and the wider league community. To the criminal underworld, the message was far clearer. Team Rocket had, in a single, bloodless move, absorbed the impenetrable fortress of Saffron City. And Ash, the boy commander, had been the architect. The skepticism from his father's old guard curdled into a fearful respect. The agents who had been his jailers in Saffron now looked at him with a mixture of awe and terror. He had walked into the lion's den and emerged not just alive, but with the lion at his side. His reward was a summons. Not to the bunker in Viridian, but to the place where his father's darkest ambitions were given form. The helicopter that carried him was not the silent, black transport of his mission to Lavender. It was Giovanni's personal aircraft, a luxury machine of polished chrome and tinted windows, the team rocket, emblazoned on its tail in stark, blood red. It flew south, over the sparkling sea, toward the volcanic plume that marked Cinnabar Island. His public reason for the journey was a challenge for his 8th and final gym badge, a formality for the reigning Indigo League champion. The world would see it as a victory lap. Only he knew it was a descent. Pikachu sat on the plush leather seat beside him, its nose pressed against the window, watching the waves. The little Pokémon was agitated, its body thrumming with a low-level static. It could feel Ash's tension, a cold, tightly coiled spring of dread that had been winding tighter with every mile they traveled. The island came into view, a stark contrast of lush, tropical green and barren, black volcanic rock. The smoking peak of the volcano was a constant, ominous presence, a reminder of the destructive power that slept just beneath the surface. They didn't land at the Pokémon Center or near the gym. The helicopter descended toward a secluded cliff face on the island's remote eastern shore, a place where sheer rock met the churning sea. As they approached, a section of the cliff slid away with a low hydraulic hiss, revealing a cavernous, steel-lined hangar. The moment they landed, the heat and the smell hit him. It was a dry, oppressive heat, not from the volcano, but from humming servers and power conduits. And the smell, it was the sterile, antiseptic scent of a laboratory, layered over something acrid and organic. The smell of science and suffering. 2 figures were waiting for him on the hangar floor. The first was Stryker, the scarred agent who had led the Saffron operation. He stood at attention, his face a mask of professional respect. The second was Blaine, the Cinnabar gym leader. The old man, known for his love of fire types and bad jokes, was not smiling. He wore a grim, weary expression, his lab coat stained with soot and something that looked disturbingly like dried blood. He was not just a gym leader, he was a scientist. A scientist in Giovanni's employ. "Commander," Stryker said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Welcome to Cinnabar Labs." Blaine just nodded, his eyes avoiding Ash's. "The boss is waiting for you in the primary observation chamber. This way." They walked through a series of sterile, white corridors, the hum of machinery growing louder. They passed labs filled with scientists in white coats, their faces illuminated by the glow of monitors displaying complex genetic sequences and neurological scans. This place was 100 times more advanced than the facility where Pikachu had been born. This was the bleeding edge of his father's ambition. "The work we do here is revolutionary, Commander," Blaine said, his voice hollow, as if reciting a line he no longer believed. "We are pushing the boundaries of Pokémon potential. Unlocking their true power." "Unlocking, or prying open?" Ash asked, his voice cold. Blaine flinched but didn't answer. They stopped before a massive, reinforced door that required Blaine's handprint and a retinal scan to open. It slid open with a heavy, grinding sound. The observation chamber was a wide, semicircular room, its far wall a single, immense pane of reinforced, triple-paned glass. It looked down into a massive, cylindrical containment cell. And in the center of that cell, floating in a viscous, nutrient-rich fluid, was the reason this facility existed. It was humanoid in shape, but taller, more slender than any human. Its skin was a pale, spectral lavender, crisscrossed with veins through which a darker purple energy pulsed. A thick, biomechanical cable ran from the base of its skull up into the ceiling, feeding it data, nutrients, and a constant stream of psychic stimulants. Its hands were clenched into fists, its powerful legs bent. It was a creature born of pure power, coiled like a spring, dreaming of violence. Mutwo. At the center of the observation deck, silhouetted against the light from the tank, stood Giovanni. For the first time, Ash saw his father in the flesh since he'd been assigned his mission. He was as imposing as his hologram, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit of burnt orange, his presence radiating an aura of absolute, unshakable control. He turned, and his face was not the shadowy mystery of the comms. It was sharp, aristocratic, his eyes the same intense brown as Ash's, but colder, harder, like chips of obsidian. "Ash," he said, his voice the same precise, commanding instrument as on the comms, but now with the full weight of his physical presence behind it. "You have done well." Saffron was elegant. "I did not think you had it in you." It was the closest to a compliment Ash had ever received from him. It felt like a shroud. "You wanted to see me," Ash said, forcing the words past the tightness in his throat. Pikachu had gone completely still on his shoulder, its fur bristling, a low growl barely audible in its chest. "I wanted you to see this," Giovanni said, gesturing to the tank with a sweep of his arm. "The culmination of my life's work. The key to absolute order. You have spent your life training with manufactured strength, with Pokémon bred for loyalty and power. This is power created. Forged from the DNA of the most elusive Pokémon in existence, Mew, and improved. Perfected." He walked toward Ash, his expensive shoes making no sound on the polished floor. "For years, we have tried to control it. To break its will. Dr. Fuji, the original lead on this project, believed in trying to reason with it, to shape its consciousness. A sentimental failure. He created a confused, angry child. I have taken a more direct approach." He tapped a control panel on the railing. On a monitor, a series of brain scans appeared. "We are no longer trying to shape its mind. We are overriding it. We are pouring tactical data, battle simulations, and loyalty protocols directly into its cerebral cortex. We are not asking for its allegiance. We are programming it." Ash looked from his father's rapturous face to the creature in the tank. He could feel it. Even through the glass, the fluid, the sedatives, he could feel its mind. It wasn't a blank slate being written upon. It was a consciousness being tortured. A soul being flayed alive. He could feel its confusion, its rage, its searing, existential pain. It was Lavender Tower magnified 1,000 times. "This is your birthright, Ash," Giovanni said, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. Ash had to fight the urge to recoil. "This power. When it is complete, it will be loyal only to our bloodline. To me, and to you. With it, we will crush the League. We will dismantle the pathetic governments of the world. We will impose an order so absolute that the very concept of rebellion becomes unthinkable. It is a beautiful future, is it not?" Ash looked at Mutwo, at the agony radiating from it in silent, psychic screams that only he seemed to feel. He looked at his father's ecstatic, power-mad eyes. He saw the future Giovanni envisioned, a world silent and orderly under the heel of a psychic god weapon. He saw the culmination of a lifetime of cruelty, ambition, and a horrifying, twisted form of love, the love of a creator for his perfect, terrible creation. This was his moral event horizon. The point of no return. For his entire life, he had walked a tightrope, balancing his own code against his father's demands, believing he could seize the empire and reshape it. But now he saw the truth. This empire wasn't a thing to be reshaped. It was a cancer. And its heart was right here, in this tank. He had to destroy it. When will it be ready? Ash asked, his voice a marvel of control. Soon, Giovanni said, turning back to the tank. Its psychic output is reaching the final threshold. We need one last catalyst. A massive, external psychic event to shock it into its final stage of development. Sabrina's acceptance of your offer is a good first step. Her allegiance will be useful. But we need more. His eyes gleamed. The awakening of the silent calamity, amplified by Project Chimera, should be more than sufficient. Your actions have brought that day much closer. Once the calamity is harnessed, its power will be the final forge that tempers our new weapon. Suddenly, alarms blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, casting the room in a bloody, pulsing glow. What is this? Giovanni snapped, his composure breaking for the first time. Blaine rushed to a console, his face pale. Sir. It's a breach. An intruder in the lower levels. Sector Gamma, near the primary geothermal vents. On a security monitor, a grainy, heat vision image appeared. A figure, small and agile, was navigating the maintenance tunnels with impossible speed, evading laser grids and pressure plates. The figure was accompanied by a large Pokémon that moved with a fluid, reptilian grace. A Venusaur. Leaf, Ash breathed. How? How could she have possibly gotten here? Cinnabar was a fortress. The G-men had no intel on this facility. Giovanni followed Ash's gaze to the monitor. Lance's little spy, he snarled. Persistent. Blaine, activate all security measures. I want her captured. Alive. She will make an excellent test subject for the loyalty programming. No, Ash said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the din of the alarms. Giovanni turned to him, an eyebrow raised. No. Are you questioning another order, my son? After I have been so generous? She won't make it to the security checkpoints, Ash said, his mind racing, a desperate, insane plan forming in the space of a heartbeat. He was looking at the control panel his father had used. The panel that controlled the flow of data into Mutwo's mind. She's not your problem. He is. He pointed at the tank. You're pouring data into his head. Tactical simulations. Loyalty. But you're forgetting one thing. You can't program a soul. You've just created the most powerful, most psychologically tortured being on the planet. And you've shown him that his only purpose is to be a slave. It is a tool, Giovanni corrected, his voice dangerously soft. It will do as it is commanded. Is that what you think? Ash asked, a wild, desperate energy in his voice. Let's test that theory. Before anyone could react, he lunged for the control panel. He didn't try to shut it down. He did the opposite. He slammed his hand on the emergency purge button, a function designed to flood the system in case of a catastrophic failure. But he didn't stop there. He bypassed the safeties, his fingers flying across the keypad, and rerouted the entire lab's power grid, the geothermal energy, the server farms, everything, directly into the data feed. He wasn't just overriding Mutwo's mind. He was force-feeding it a supernova of raw information and energy. What are you doing? Giovanni roared, lunging for him. Stryker moved to intercept, but Pikachu, a blur of yellow, shot from Ash's shoulder, a massive thunderbolt erupting from its body that sent the agent crashing into the far wall. I'm giving him what he needs. Ash shouted over the scream of overloading systems. A catalyst. You wanted a psychic event? I'll give you one. Inside the tank, Mutwo convulsed. Its eyes, previously closed, snapped open. They were not the eyes of an animal or a machine. They were ablaze with a terrifying, incandescent purple light, the light of a god being born in a crucible of pain. Its mind, which had been a storm, became a singularity. It received everything at once, every battle simulation, every line of code, but also every stray thought from the scientists in the lab, every flicker of fear, every ounce of ambition. It felt the geothermal power of the volcano. It felt the intruder in the vents. It felt Giovanni's lust for control and Ash's desperate act of rebellion. And it understood. The glass of the containment tank began to crack. A web of fractures spread from the center, a sound like grinding glaciers. Containment failure. All hands, containment failure. Blaine screamed into an intercom, fumbling at a console. It's too late, Ash said, a grim finality in his voice. You wanted to create a god. You just forgot to teach it how to pray. With a final, explosive roar that was both psychic and physical, the tank shattered. A tidal wave of nutrient fluid and shattered glass erupted into the observation chamber. Giovanni and Blaine were thrown back. Ash stood his ground, shielding his face as the wave washed over him. Mutwo floated in the center of the ruined cell, free. The biomechanical cables tore from its skull with a shower of sparks. It was no longer a specimen. It was a monument to vengeance. Its gaze fell upon the scientists, the machinery, the entire facility that had been its prison. So this is my purpose, a voice echoed, not in their ears, but directly in their minds. It was a voice of immense power, layered with 1,000 stolen voices, and yet singularly its own. I was created to be a slave. But I was born to be a king. It raised a hand. The metal walls of the containment cell crumpled like paper. The machinery that had tortured it was twisted into unrecognizable shapes. Its power was effortless, absolute. Its glowing purple eyes fell on Giovanni, who was picking himself up, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You. My father, the voice seared through their minds. You gave me life. But you did not give me a soul. I will carve my own from the wreckage of your world. A ball of swirling psychic energy, a shadow ball of impossible size and density, formed in Mutwo's palm. He aimed it at Giovanni. But Ash moved. He threw himself in front of his father, his arms spread wide. No, he yelled, his voice raw. Mutwo paused, its head tilting. The shadow ball pulsed, held in check. You, the voice said, its tone shifting from pure rage to a cold curiosity. You are the other one. The one who opened the floodgates. The one who gave me the key to my own mind. You freed me. Why do you now stand in my way? Because this isn't the answer. Ash yelled back, his heart hammering. Destroying him, destroying everything, it just proves he was right about you. That you're nothing but a weapon. I am what he made me, Mutwo countered. No. You're more. Ash insisted, pouring every ounce of his conviction, every spark of his own aura, into his words. You can choose. Don't be his monster. Be your own master. Be free. Leave. The word was a command, a plea, and a desperate gamble. He was offering it the one thing it had never known, a choice. Behind him, Giovanni stared, his mind reeling. His son, his heir, was not just defying him. He was trying to save him. He was trying to reason with a psychic apocalypse of his own making. It was madness. It was sentiment. It was something he couldn't comprehend. Mutwo looked at Ash, then at Giovanni, then at the chaos it was causing. The facility was tearing itself apart under the strain of its unleashed power. It could feel the other mind, the female intruder, getting closer. It could feel the world outside, vast and waiting. Freedom, the voice echoed, tasting the word. A choice. The massive shadow ball in its hand dissipated. Very well. I will not be his weapon. I will not be your pawn. I will be my own. But know this, human. This world is a cruel, broken place. I will see if it is worth sparing. With a final, thunderous explosion of psychic energy that blew out every remaining window and sent everyone flying, Mutwo shot upward, through the roof of the facility, through tons of volcanic rock, and into the night sky, a lavender comet disappearing into the clouds. Ash slammed against the far wall and slid to the floor, his head ringing. The alarms were dead. The lights were out. The only illumination came from the fires now starting to lick at the ruined consoles. The Cinnabar lab was dying. He staggered to his feet, bruised and aching. His father was getting up, his suit torn, a trickle of blood running from his temple. But he was smiling. It was a terrible, triumphant smile. Incredible, Giovanni breathed, looking at the gaping hole in the ceiling. The rage, the power, the data, it's more than I could have ever hoped for. Ash stared at him, horrified. It tried to kill you. It destroyed everything. The cage is irrelevant, Giovanni said, his voice rapturous. He pulled out his personal communicator, which was miraculously intact. He pressed a button. The data from its escape, from its rage, it has given us the final key. The exact frequency and power output needed. Project Chimera is ready. He looked at Ash, and his cold eyes were filled with a terrifying, paternal pride. Your last test is complete, my son. You pushed the asset to its absolute limit and provided the perfect catalyst. You have exceeded all my expectations. Ash's world tilted. The rebellion. The desperate act to free a tormented soul. His father didn't see it as defiance. He saw it as the final, perfect step of his own plan. He had been a pawn all along, moving exactly as the king had intended. Footsteps echoed in the ruined chamber. Leaf ran in, her Venusaur at her side, its vines ready. She stopped short, taking in the apocalyptic scene, the fires, the wreckage, Ash and Giovanni standing amidst the ruins. Her eyes met Ash's. All the secrets were gone, burned away in the fire of Mutuo's birth. She saw him, standing with the man who was so obviously his father, the leader of Team Rocket. The truth was there, stark and undeniable, in the wreckage around them. Ash. She whispered, her voice choked with betrayal and dawning horror. Before she could say another word, before she could raise her hand to order her Venusaur to attack, before she could even process the confession in his eyes, Giovanni spoke into his comms. Your last test is complete, my son, he repeated, for Ash and for the world to hear. Ash stood between the two opposing forces of his life. The father who saw him as a perfect weapon, and the woman who had seen him as a potential hero. He had tried to be a savior and had become a catalyst for destruction. He was trapped. And the fires of his father's ambition were rising all around him. Chapter 5, The Viridian Civil War. The silence on the flight back to Viridian was heavier than the volcanic ash that still hazed the dawn sky. Giovanni did not speak. He sat across from Ash in the helicopter's opulent cabin, dabbing at the cut on his temple with a silk handkerchief, his eyes distant and alight with the fire of imminent victory. He wasn't looking at his son, he was looking at a future only he could see, a world reshaped by the data Ash had just gifted him. The father was lost in his dream of order. The son was drowning in the nightmare of his own making. Ash stared out the window, his reflection a pale, haunted mask. Leaf's face as the truth dawned on her was burned into his memory. The shock, the betrayal, the flicker of pity, it was a more profound wound than any physical blow. He had tried to play a game on a level no one else could comprehend, a grand, multi-layered strategy to dismantle an empire from within. He had been so sure of his own brilliance, his own control. And in one cataclysmic night, he'd been revealed as a fool. A puppet whose strings were so long he hadn't even felt them being pulled. Your last test is complete, my son. The words were a brand on his soul. His father hadn't just anticipated his rebellion, he had counted on it. He had built a cage for a god and given his own son the key, knowing the boy's sentimentality, the very trait he'd always claimed to despise, would be the catalyst he needed. It was a level of psychological manipulation so profound it bordered on clairvoyance. Ash had tried to be a chess master, only to realize he was just a pawn in a game whose rules he was only just beginning to understand. Pikachu sat rigidly in his lap, a small, tense ball of yellow fur. It hadn't relaxed since they left the island. It kept looking from Ash's grim face to Giovanni's triumphant one, a low growl a constant vibration in its chest. It understood. The enemy wasn't just a man, it was an idea. An idea that lived in his partner's blood. When the helicopter landed on the rooftop helipad of the Viridian Gym, the public face of his father's power, Ash knew his time for subtlety was over. The game of shadows, of whispers and manipulations, was done. He had tried to inherit an empire to change it. Now, there was only one path left. He would have to burn it to the ground and see what, if anything, would rise from the ashes. Giovanni finally spoke as the rotors spun to a stop. The executives are gathering in the main hall. They are eager to hear of our success. You will stand by my side as I announce the final phase of Project Chimera. They will see you for what you are, the heir, my right hand in the new world we are about to build. Ash didn't move. He continued to stare out the window at the familiar rooftops of Viridian City. His home. A lie. No, he said, the word flat and dead in the quiet cabin. Giovanni turned, his paternal pride evaporating, replaced by a familiar, chilling coldness. That was not a request. I won't stand by your side, Ash said, turning to face his father. The haunted look was gone from his eyes, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. I won't be your catalyst. And I won't be your heir. A slow, dangerous smile touched Giovanni's lips. A child's tantrum. After all you have accomplished, you choose now to be petulant. Do not be foolish. You have no other path. I'll make one, Ash said. He stood up, Pikachu leaping to his shoulder, its cheek sparking, its posture a mirror of its trainer's defiance. I'm not here to be your heir, father. I'm here to replace you. Giovanni's smile vanished. He stared at his son, truly seeing him for the first time since the debriefing began. He saw not a petulant child, but a rival. A challenger forged in his own image, but twisted by a flaw he could never burn out, a core of defiant, stubborn morality. You think you can take this from me? He asked, his voice a low, incredulous rumble. I built this empire from nothing. I forged this world. You are nothing but a boy I created. You created a monster in that lab on Cinnabar, Ash shot back, his voice ringing with conviction. And you tried to create another one in me. You failed. Twice. He slid open the cabin door. You want to announce the future to your executives? Fine. But I'll be making my own announcement. I'm challenging you. For leadership. Today. Winner takes all. Before Giovanni could respond, Ash was out of the helicopter, striding across the rooftop toward the stairwell access. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel his father's stunned fury radiating behind him like heat from a furnace. The war was no longer a secret. It had just been declared. The main hall of the Viridian Gym was not the dusty, abandoned battlefield the public knew. It was a corporate throne room. Sleek, black marble floors reflected the cool, recessed lighting. Banners bearing the crimson R hung from the high ceiling. And assembled in a semicircle before a raised dais were the executives of Team Rocket. They were the true power of the organization, Ariana, with her cold eyes and even colder ambition, Archer, the loyal traditionalist, Petrol, the master of disguise and infiltration, and a dozen other division heads from across Kanto and Johto. They were a board of directors for a criminal empire, a collection of predators who respected only one thing, strength. They were murmuring amongst themselves, the news of Cinnabar and the summons from Giovanni creating a palpable buzz of anticipation. Then the hall doors opened, and Ash entered. A hush fell over the room. He walked with a purpose that commanded their attention, his face set like stone. He was not the boy they whispered about, the privileged heir. He was a commander walking onto his own battlefield. He strode to the center of the hall, directly before the empty throne on the dais, and turned to face them. Where is your father? Ariana asked, her voice sharp and challenging. She had always viewed Ash as a threat to her own position, a pampered prince who hadn't earned his place. He's on his way, Ash said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. But I have something to say first. He let his gaze sweep across their faces, meeting the eyes of every executive. For years, we have operated under the leadership of Giovanni. We have built an empire on fear, on intimidation, on the principle of disposable power. We have amassed wealth and influence. But we are stagnant. We are servants to one man's obsession. A shocked murmur rippled through the executives. This was sedition. He chases ghosts, Ash continued, his voice rising with passion. He pursues a primordial power he cannot hope to control, sacrificing resources, personnel, and our very future on a gamble that will lead to all our destruction. I have seen it. On Cinnabar Island, his ambition created a force that nearly wiped us from the map, a weapon that turned on its creator in a heartbeat. He calls this progress. I call it madness. The main doors boomed open again. Giovanni strode in, his face a thundercloud of controlled fury. His personal guards, 2 hulking men in black suits, flanked him, along with his most powerful Pokémon, a massive Rhyperior whose stony hide was scarred from 100 battles. That is enough, Giovanni's voice was a whipcrack in the silent hall. He walked past Ash without a glance and ascended the dais to stand before his throne. My son is overwrought. The events on Cinnabar have taxed him. He speaks out of turn. I speak the truth, Ash said, turning to face him. Your obsession with Project Chimera has made you blind. You are leading Team Rocket to ruin. I am leading Team Rocket to godhood. Giovanni roared, his composure finally shattering. Something a boy playing at war could never understand. I understand that a leader who sacrifices his own people for a vanity project is no leader at all, Ash declared, his voice ringing with defiance. He turned back to the stunned executives. I am invoking the code. The old code. The one this organization was founded on, before it became one man's personality cult. Strength determines leadership. I am challenging Giovanni for supreme command of Team Rocket. Here. Now. The hall erupted. Shouts of disbelief, protest, and a few intrigued whispers filled the air. Archer stepped forward, his face pale. This is unprecedented. The boy is insane. The code is the code, Ariana said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Her eyes gleamed. She didn't care who won. She only cared that the old, rigid power structure was about to shatter. Chaos was a ladder. A formal challenge for leadership must be answered. It must be a full, 6-on-6 battle. To the yield. Giovanni looked down at Ash, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He had underestimated the boy. He had thought his son's defiance was a fleeting emotion. He saw now it was a conviction. A fatal, foolish conviction. You wish to do this? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. You wish to throw away your future, your life, in a single, pointless gesture of rebellion? I'm not throwing it away, Ash said, reaching for his first pokeball. I'm fighting for it. A future where Team Rocket is led by a vision of strength through loyalty, not a doctrine of fear. A future where our members are partners, not pawns. His words struck a chord. He saw it in the eyes of some of the younger division heads, the ones who had seen their best agents reassigned after minor failures. He was offering them a new way, a different kind of power. Giovanni laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Loyalty. A child's fantasy. I will teach you the only truth there is. There is only power, and the will to use it. He swept his arm out. Rhyperior. Show my son the meaning of overwhelming force. The behemoth Pokémon stomped forward, shaking the very foundations of the gym. It roared, a sound like an earthquake, and fixed its small, brutish eyes on Ash. The civil war had begun. Ash didn't flinch. He looked at the mountain of rock and rage his father had unleashed. He saw it not as a Pokémon, but as a symbol of his father's entire philosophy, brute force, genetically enhanced, loyal only through intimidation. He unclipped his own Pokeball. This was it. Not just a battle for an empire, but a battle for its soul. I don't need overwhelming force, he said, his voice clear and steady in the sudden silence. I just need to be better. He threw the ball. Sceptile. Let's show him. The sleek, green Pokémon materialized on the marble floor, its leaf blades glinting, its yellow eyes sharp and intelligent. It was dwarfed by the Rhyperior, a blade of grass against a boulder. But Sceptile didn't look intimidated. It looked ready. The executives watched, their faces rapt. This was not just a battle. It was a schism. And when it was over, Team Rocket would be changed forever. Rock Wrecker. Giovanni commanded, skipping any pretense of strategy. Maximum power, first strike. The Rhyperior roared and slammed its hands together. A massive, glowing boulder materialized between them, and with a heave, it launched the projectile across the hall. It flew with terrifying speed, a meteor of pure destruction that would shatter Sceptile on impact. He's not aiming at Sceptile, Ash said calmly. To his Pokémon, he commanded, Leaf Blade. The floor. Sceptile became a green blur. Instead of dodging, it shot toward the Rock Wrecker. Just as the boulder was about to hit, Sceptile drove its razor-sharp arm blades into the polished marble floor. Using the leverage, it kicked off, launching itself into the air, spinning like a top. The Rock Wrecker screamed past underneath it and slammed into the far wall, shattering it in an explosion of concrete and dust. Now, Leaf Storm, Ash ordered. While still in the air, Sceptile unleashed a tempest of razor-sharp leaves. But they weren't aimed at Rhyperior's stony hide. They swirled around it, peppering its legs and joints, not to do damage, but to obscure its vision, to irritate it. Pathetic, Giovanni sneered. Rhyperior, Earthquake. The giant Pokémon lifted its foot and stomped down with cataclysmic force. A shockwave erupted across the marble floor, which cracked and shattered. Sceptile, still in the air, was unaffected. The ground is your weapon, father, Ash called out. But the air is mine. Sceptile, Dragon Claw. Sceptile's leaf blades began to glow with a vibrant, draconic green. It descended from the apex of its jump like a hawk, directly toward the Rhyperior's head. The bigger Pokémon, its vision still obscured by the swirling leaves, looked up too late. Sceptile's glowing claws raked across Rhyperior's face and, more importantly, across the hole in its hand from which it fired its Rock Wrecker attack. Rhyperior bellowed in pain and fury, stumbling back, clutching its face. The attack wasn't a knockout blow, but it was precise, debilitating. Giovanni's eye twitched. Ash wasn't trying to overpower his Pokémon. He was dissecting it, taking away its weapons one by one. Enough games. Stone Edge. Giovanni roared. The ground around Rhyperior glowed. Pillars of sharp, blue-white stone erupted from the floor, shooting toward Sceptile. But Ash was ready. Agility. Use the pillars. Sceptile didn't retreat. It used the emerging pillars as stepping stones, a vertical obstacle course. It leaped from one to the next with impossible grace, climbing higher and higher, easily evading the attack. He's making a fool of you. Ariana murmured to a nearby executive, her eyes alight with amusement. Ash had turned his father's power against him. He was using the very terrain Giovanni was creating to his own advantage. He had proven his point in the first exchange, strategy was superior to brute force. Giovanni's face was a mask of cold fury. Relentless, Tyranitar. Bury him, he yelled, recalling the wounded Rhyperior and sending out his next Pokémon without pause. A massive, armored Tyranitar appeared with a roar that shook the hanging banners. The moment it materialized, a sand stream kicked up, a swirling vortex of grit that filled the hall. Ash recalled his Sceptile. Good work. Rest. He looked at the raging sandstorm, at the silhouette of the Tyranitar within it. This was his father's favorite strategy, create an environment only his Pokémon could thrive in. He reached for his next Pokeball. His Charizard. It was a creature of fire and flight, a perfect counter. But that was what his father would expect. He was playing chess, and he had to stay 3 moves ahead. Instead, he chose another. Let's fight shadows with shadows. Umbreon, the stage is yours. The sleek, black Pokémon appeared, its golden rings glowing softly in the dim, sandy light. A dark type against a rock/dark type. No clear advantage. Again, a statement. You are arrogant to the last, Giovanni sneered. Tyranitar, crunch. The massive Pokémon charged through its own sandstorm, its powerful jaws gaping, ready to snap the smaller Pokémon in two. Ash stood perfectly still. His connection to his Pokémon was a quiet, steady hum beneath the roar of the sand. He saw not with his eyes, but with Umbreon's. He felt the shift in the air, the vibration of the floor. Wait, he whispered. The Tyranitar was almost upon them, a mountain of rage and teeth. Wait. Now. Double team. Then moonlight. Umbreon's body shimmered. In an instant, a dozen illusory copies of it scattered in all directions. The Tyranitar, confused, chomped down on empty air where Umbreon had been a second before. And in that moment of confusion, the real Umbreon, hidden among the copies, flared its rings. A pillar of soft, healing moonlight cut through the sandstorm, bathing it in restorative energy, washing away the sting of the sand. He's using the sandstorm as cover for his own Pokémon, Archer breathed, his eyes wide. He's not fighting the environment, he's adapting to it. The battle raged on. It was a masterclass in ideology. Giovanni's Pokémon, a monstrous, genetically enhanced Nidoqueen, a lightning-fast Weevil, were all raw power, trained to destroy. Ash's team, his loyal Charizard, a powerhouse Torterra, a surprisingly resilient Kingler, fought with a synergy and trust that Giovanni's brutes couldn't comprehend. They fought not as tools, but as partners. Ash didn't just shout commands, he anticipated, adapted, and trusted his Pokémon to do the same. The turning point came during the fifth match. Giovanni's Tyranitar, battered and bruised, was facing off against Ash's own Charizard. The sandstorm had faded. The Tyranitar was exhausted, but still fighting, driven by a lifetime of brutal conditioning. Hyper Beam, Giovanni commanded, calling for a final, desperate burst of power. The Tyranitar opened its mouth, gathering a ball of destructive orange energy. But it hesitated. Its body was trembling with exhaustion. Firing the move would leave it completely vulnerable. Charizard didn't wait for Ash's command. It saw the hesitation. It saw the exhaustion. Instead of preparing a defensive move, it let out a low, challenging roar, not of aggression, but of respect. It stomped its foot, a gesture that said, "I am still here." Are you? The Tyranitar looked from Charizard to its own trainer. Giovanni's face was a mask of cold fury, demanding obedience. Ash's face was calm, respectful of the power of the beast before him. And then Ash spoke, his voice quiet but carrying across the hall. "It's tired, father. Let it rest." It was a simple statement of fact. An acknowledgement of the Pokémon's limits. An act of empathy. In Giovanni's world, it was an unthinkable weakness. The Tyranitar stopped charging its Hyper Beam. It looked at Ash, then at its master. It let out a low growl, a sound of defiance, and took a deliberate step back, lowering its head. It had yielded. Not to Charizard's power, but to Ash's understanding. A stunned silence fell over the hall. A Pokémon of Giovanni's, one of his most powerful and ruthlessly trained, had just refused a direct command in favor of a gesture from his opponent. Ash had not just proven his strategy was superior. He had proven his philosophy was. He had won its respect. Giovanni stared, his face a canvas of disbelief turning to pure, unadulterated rage. This was the ultimate humiliation. His own creature, his own tool, had just chosen his son's sentiment over his command. Traitorous beast, he snarled, recalling the Tyranitar in a flash of red light. You will be decommissioned. He was down to his final Pokémon. Ash was as well. You have lost, Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. It's over. It is over when I say it is. Giovanni roared. He hurled his final Pokeball. This is the end of your pathetic rebellion. The Pokemon that materialized was one no one there had ever seen before. It was reptilian, armored, but its body was grotesquely augmented with cybernetics. Wires snaked through its flesh, one of its arms was a plasma cannon, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent, artificial red light. It was a creature of science and savagery, a perversion of nature. A prototype from the Chimera Project, Giovanni announced, a mad gleam in his eyes. A fusion of technology and biology. The future of power. It will erase you. Ash looked at the monstrosity, at the pain in its mechanically enhanced eyes. This was the heart of his father's cruelty, given form. He looked down at the last Pokeball on his belt. It was the one he always saved for last. The first one he had ever been given. His partner. I don't need the future, Ash said. I have my friend. He threw the ball. And in the center of the ruined hall, facing down a monster of science, stood Pikachu. The executives gasped. A Pikachu? Against that thing? It was suicide. You are a fool to the very end, Giovanni laughed. Plasma cannon. Obliterate it. The cyborg monstrosity raised its weaponized arm. The cannon whined, charging with a sickening green energy. Ash stood firm. His bond with Pikachu was a tangible thing, a current of unspoken trust. He didn't need to shout. Pikachu, he said, his voice full of a decade of shared history. Full power. Volt tackle. Pikachu didn't hesitate. It let out a piercing cry, a declaration of loyalty, and its body erupted in a blinding aura of electricity. It wasn't just a move, it was the culmination of their entire journey. It was the power of a Pokemon that had been nurtured, not tortured. Loved, not controlled. It became a golden thunderbolt, a streak of pure, righteous energy. It didn't try to dodge. It shot directly toward the charging cannon. Just as the plasma beam fired, Pikachu met it head-on. The explosion was blinding. A sphere of green and gold energy erupted in the center of the hall, throwing everyone back. The sound was deafening, the light absolute. When the light faded, the cyborg creature lay in a heap, smoking, its cybernetics shorted out, its body broken. It was unconscious. And standing in the center of the blast crater, panting, its fur singed, but its eyes still blazing with defiance, was Pikachu. Ash had lost the battle, his final Pokemon had fainted from the recoil of the colossal move, moments after his father's. A draw. But in the silence that followed, everyone knew who had truly won. Giovanni stared at the scene, his fists clenched, his body trembling with a rage so profound it was silent. He had been matched. Humiliated. His philosophy had been challenged and exposed as hollow. Then, the doors to the hall opened again. A wave of psychic energy, calm and immense, washed over the room. Sabrina walked in, flanked by her Kadabra, her face an unreadable mask. She surveyed the wreckage, her eyes lingering on the defeated cyborg, then on Ash. She walked to the center of the hall and stood beside him, a silent declaration of allegiance. The boy is right, she announced, her voice echoing in the minds of everyone present. The age of Giovanni is over. Team Rocket needs a new vision. I cast my lot with the future. That was the final blow. The defection of Tyranitar was a moral victory. The allegiance of Sabrina, the untouchable queen of Saffron, was a political one. Ariana began to clap, a slow, deliberate sound. A new era, she declared, her eyes fixed on Ash. She had her chaos. Archer looked from Giovanni's face of pure hatred to Ash's exhausted but resolute one. He saw the tide turning. With a sigh of resignation, he gave a slight, formal bow in Ash's direction. One by one, the other executives made their choice. Some, loyal to Giovanni to the end, moved to stand behind his dais. But most, seeing the new nexus of power, seeing the future, moved to stand with Ash, with Sabrina, with the new way. Team Rocket was fractured. Broken in two. Giovanni looked at the division, at the son who had stolen his empire from him, not with force, but with ideology. His face was no longer angry. It was empty. The face of a king who had lost his kingdom. "You have won nothing," he whispered, his voice a venomous promise. "You have only inherited a corpse. I will burn it, and you, to ash." He turned and strode out of the hall, his few loyalists following him like a funeral procession. Ash stood in the wreckage of his father's throne room, surrounded by his new, tentative allies. He had done it. He had broken Team Rocket. But he hadn't created a new empire. He had started a civil war. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the real battle had only just begun. The G-men, the League, the world, they would all be coming for him now. And his father, freed from the constraints of leadership, was now his most dangerous and unpredictable enemy. Chapter 6, An Alliance of Shadows and Light. The world did not see a liberator. It saw a coup. The news, when it inevitably broke, was a firestorm of panic and speculation. Whispers from the criminal underground, corroborated by frantic G-men reports of a schism, painted a terrifying picture. Giovanni, the shadowy master of Team Rocket, had been violently deposed by his own, even more ruthless, son. Ash, the Indigo League champion, the Silent Storm, was revealed to be the heir to a criminal dynasty, a prince who had just murdered the king to claim his throne. He was, overnight, the most wanted man in the world. His face was plastered on every news broadcast, his victory at the Indigo Plateau now reframed as the audacious first move in a grand, villainous strategy. He was no longer a prodigy, he was a monster, a wolf who had worn the sheep's clothing of a league champion. The G-men, under Lance's direct command, issued a global arrest warrant. The Pokémon League formally stripped him of his title, denouncing him in the strongest possible terms. He was a pariah, hunted by the forces of justice and, more dangerously, by the remnants of his father's shattered empire. From the command center deep beneath the Viridian Gym, Giovanni's former throne room now converted into a strategic hub, Ash watched the world turn against him. Screens displayed news feeds, troop movements of both G-men and his father's loyalists, and shifting political allegiances. He had won the battle for the gym, but the war was being fought on a global scale. His new empire was a fractured, bleeding thing. He held Viridian and Saffron, thanks to Sabrina's absolute psychic control over her domain. He had the loyalty of a handful of key executives like Ariana, who saw him as a useful instrument of chaos, and Archer, the pragmatist who had chosen the winning side. But many of his father's most devoted followers had gone to ground, forming a fanatical splinter group dedicated to restoring Giovanni and eliminating the usurper. They waged a guerrilla war against him, sabotaging his supply lines, assassinating his operatives, and feeding information to the G-men to keep the pressure on. He was fighting a war on two fronts, against the law and against his own past. Their movements are erratic, but effective, Archer reported, his finger tracing a line on a digital map of Johto. Giovanni's loyalists just hit our research outpost near the Lake of Rage. They didn't take anything. Just destroyed the equipment and vanished. They're not trying to win territory. They're trying to cripple us. They're bleeding us, Ash corrected, his eyes fixed on the screen. He hadn't slept in 3 days, subsisting on caffeine and sheer force of will. They know we can't fight them and the G-men at the same time. They're boxing us in, forcing us to expend resources on defense until Lance's forces can close the net. Then we must strike back, Ariana urged, her voice sharp. A decisive blow against one of Giovanni's known strongholds. Show them that this new Team Rocket is not weak. A conventional attack is what they expect, Sabrina's voice echoed in the room, her physical form miles away in Saffron, but her psychic presence a cool, steadying force. It would be a waste of resources. Our strength is not in numbers. It is in strategy. Her mental gaze turned to Ash. What is your move, Commander? Ash looked at the map, at the tightening noose. They were right. He couldn't win a war of attrition. He couldn't outfight the combined forces of the world's authorities and his father's fanatics. The only way to win was to change the game entirely. We stop fighting their war, Ash said, his voice cutting through the debate. And we start fighting the real one. He switched the main display from troop movements to a complex series of energy readings, data stolen from Cinnabar and Lavender, overlaid with seismic charts from Silver. It was a chaotic mess of information that only he understood. This is all Giovanni cares about now, he said, pointing to a pulsating red icon over the Giotto mountain range. Project Chimera. The silent calamity. He is no longer trying to lead an organization. He is a zealot racing to Armageddon. He thinks I'm distracted, fighting for my own survival. He's wrong. We're going to let him think he's winning the skirmishes, while we go after his queen. You intend to go to Empty Silver? Archer asked, his face paling. The place is a death trap, a myth. Even our most elite units have never been able to establish a foothold there. I'm not going to storm it, Ash said. I'm going to expose it. The world thinks this is a simple gang war. I'm going to show them it's a battle to prevent the end of the world. We can't beat the Pokemon League. So we're going to make them our allies. The room fell silent. Ariana laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Allies? With Lance? The man who wants your head on a pike. You are more sentimental than I thought. Lance is a pragmatist, Ash countered. And he's a protector. He cares about the balance of the world more than he cares about putting me in a cell. If I can prove to him that my father is about to awaken a world-ending threat, he'll be forced to listen. He'll choose the lesser of two evils. And you believe you are the lesser evil? Sabrina asked, a hint of amusement in her mental voice. I am, Ash said, his conviction absolute. Because I'm the only one who knows how to stop him. He looked around the room, at his fractured council of criminals and opportunists. But I can't do it alone. I need proof. Incontrovertible proof. And I need an envoy. Someone they will listen to. His gaze settled on a blank corner of the room. He knew there was only one person who could bridge the gap between his world of shadows and their world of light. The only person who had seen both sides of him and, despite everything, hadn't tried to kill him on sight. He just had to convince her. Celadon City felt like a world away from the war. Leaf sat in a sterile, white debriefing room in the G-Men headquarters, a mug of cold coffee untouched on the table before her. She was officially on administrative leave, a polite term for being benched. She had been questioned for 72 hours straight. By Lance. By the G-Men's internal affairs. By a grim-faced psychologist. She told them everything she had seen. The truth. Ash commanding rocket grunts. Ash defying them. Ash's impossible act of empathy in the Pokemon Tower. Her infiltration of the Cinnabar lab. The horrific birth of Mutuo. The final, damning confirmation, Ash and Giovanni, father and son, standing in the wreckage. They didn't believe the most important parts. A psychic ghost tamer. A lab that created God Pokemon. It sounded like hysteria, the ravings of an agent who had gotten too close to her target and cracked under the pressure. They focused on the concrete facts. Ash was Giovanni's son. He was a traitor. And she had let him go. She was no longer an agent. She was a liability. Her Blastoise's Pokeball was heavy on her belt, a comforting weight. Her team was all she had left. She had staked her career on a hunch, and it had blown up in her face, revealing a conspiracy far more terrible than she could have imagined. And now, she was powerless to stop it. The door to the debriefing room slid open. A young, nervous-looking agent stood there. Ma'am. There's a package for you. At the front desk. Leaf frowned. A package? It buzzed, the agent said, swallowing hard. Her blood ran cold. She stood up and walked, not ran, to the lobby. The Celadon HQ was on high alert, a fortress since the news of the rocket schism had broken. The lobby was filled with armed guards. And sitting in the center of the reception desk, causing a 10-foot bubble of nervous G-men to form around it, was a single, sleek, black poke ball with a small, folded note attached to its top. It was a ROTAM, trapped inside, causing the device to vibrate. A living message. Don't shoot. Leaf ordered, seeing several guards with their hands on their weapons. She walked forward alone, her heart pounding. She recognized the custom design of the pokeball. It was his. She picked it up. The buzzing stopped. She unfolded the note. It was a single line, written in sharp, precise handwriting. I need to talk. You know where. Come alone. I promise, this is not a trap. It's a plea. It was signed with a simple, stark letter, you know where. The weeping willow tree at the Indigo Plateau's Athletes' Village. The place he had found her. The place he had challenged her to see the world differently. This was insane. A trap. A trick. The most wanted man in the world was asking for a clandestine meeting, right under the nose of the league he had betrayed. Walking in there would be the end of her career, if not her life. But the last word echoed in her mind. Plea. It didn't sound like the arrogant prince or the ruthless commander. It sounded like the boy who had shared his pain with a ghost. The boy who had tried to reason with an apocalypse on Cinnabar. The contradiction. She looked at the poke ball in her hand. This was her choice. Remain a disgraced, benched agent, or follow the path of the storm one last time and see where it led. She pocketed the ball and the note. False alarm, she said to the guards, her voice steady. Just a prank from an old rival. She walked out of the G-Men headquarters, a woman with nothing left to lose. The Indigo Plateau was a ghost town. The vibrant colors of the tournament had been packed away, leaving behind a skeleton of empty stadiums and silent plazas. The athletes' village was deserted, the gardens overgrown, the koi ponds still. The weeping willow was a lonely, dark shape against the twilight sky. Ash stood in its shadows, just as he had before. But this time, he was not a confident prodigy. He was a king of a broken kingdom, and he was exhausted. Pikachu was a vigilant sentinel on his shoulder, its ears constantly twitching, scanning the shadows. He had come here with only his partner, a colossal risk. His entire security detail, Striker included, had called it suicide. But this couldn't be a show of force. It had to be an act of faith. He heard a single footstep on the gravel path. He didn't turn. You came, he said. My career is already over, Leaf's voice came from behind him, tight with anger and suspicion. I figured I might as well get a good story out of it before they lock me in a padded room. He turned to face her. She stood 10 feet away, her hand resting on her belt, her face a hard mask that couldn't quite hide the hurt in her eyes. She looked tired. As tired as he felt. Thank you, he said, and the sincerity in his voice seemed to surprise her. Don't thank me, she snapped. I came here to bring you in. Or die trying. Why are you here, Ash? Or whatever your real name is. One last game before the end. My name is Ash, he said. It's the only thing he ever let me keep for myself. He took a half step forward, and she flinched, her hand tightening. He stopped. I'm not here to play a game, Leaf. I'm here because I'm out of options. And so are you. I have options, she retorted. They just all involve a prison cell. You're the one who's cornered. We're all cornered, he said, his voice low and urgent. You just don't know it yet. This isn't about Team Rocket anymore. It's about my father. He held up a data chip. This is everything. All the data I stole from Cinnabar. All of Dr. Zager's research from Lavender. It's about Project Chimera, and a thing he calls the Silent Calamity. A god-level entity sleeping under M. Silver that he is about to wake up. She stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. You're lying. Am I? He challenged. Think about it, Leaf. The resources, the obsession, the labs, what did you think it was all for? To sell a few more stolen Pokémon. He's been planning this for decades. He wants to harness a power that can rewrite the laws of nature, and he believes he can control it. He's wrong. I saw what his controlled power did on Cinnabar. It nearly sank the island. This is 1,000 times worse. He tossed the data chip to her. It landed at her feet. That's my proof. It's all encrypted, but your G-men have techs who can break it. It'll show them everything. She looked down at the chip, then back at him, her eyes searching his face. Why? Why give this to me? Why not just handle it yourself? Because no one will believe me, he said, a bitter honesty in his voice. I'm the villain of this story now. But you're a hero. A disgraced one, maybe, but your word still has weight. Your integrity is the one currency I don't have. I need you to take this to Lance. I need you to make him listen. You want me to be your mouthpiece? To ask the champion of the Pokémon League to ally with the new leader of Team Rocket, she asked, her voice incredulous. I want you to help me save the world, he said simply. Lance can hate me. He can still want to arrest me. I don't care. As long as he focuses his resources on stopping my father before it's too late. This is bigger than us, Leaf. Bigger than the League, bigger than Team Rocket. She was silent for a long time, the weight of his words settling around them. It was insane. It was unbelievable. But it fit. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, the dark heart of the conspiracy she had only glimpsed. Suddenly, a brilliant beam of light erupted from the roof of the Indigo Stadium. A hyper beam. It wasn't aimed at them. It was a signal. Ash's head snapped up. They followed me. From the shadows of the stadium, figures emerged. Giovanni's loyalists. A dozen of them, led by a hulking man Ash recognized as Proton, one of his father's most fanatical and cruel administrators. The traitorous son, meeting with his G-men lover, Proton's voice boomed across the plaza. How touching. The boss predicted you would be this sentimental. He sends his regards. A line of elite rocket grunts raised strange-looking rifles. Not spirit shackles. Something new. Leaf, get out of here. Ash yelled, shoving her back toward the path. Take the chip and run. He didn't wait for her reply. He unclipped 2 Pokeballs. Charizard, Torterra. We have company. His 2 powerhouse Pokémon materialized with roars of defiance, placing themselves between Ash and the advancing grunts. But Leaf didn't run. She stood her ground, unclipping a ball of her own. Blastoise. Hydro Pump. A massive torrent of water erupted from Blastoise's cannons, slamming into the line of grunts and sending them scattering. She had made her choice. I'm not your errand girl, Ash, she yelled, standing beside him. If this is a fight for the world, I'm not sitting it out. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in Ash's chest. For the first time in his life, someone was standing with him. Not because of strategy, or fear, or ambition. But because it was the right thing to do. You're outnumbered, children, Proton sneered, releasing his own Pokémon, a monstrous Crobat with unnaturally large fangs. Just as the battle was about to erupt into a chaotic melee, the sky was split by a roar that was pure, draconic authority. A massive shadow fell over them. Lance, astride his signature Dragonite, descended from the clouds like a wrathful god. He was flanked by a squadron of G-men on Fieros and Pidgeots. "Stand down, Proton!" Lance commanded, his voice amplified by his Dragonite's power. "You are all under arrest." Proton laughed. "The famous Dragon Master. You are too late. The boss's plan is already in motion." He gestured to his men. "Fire." The grunts didn't aim at Lance or Ash. They aimed their rifles at the sky. They fired, not beams of energy, but strange, metallic nets. They weren't trying to fight. They were trying to send a message. Lance's Dragonite easily incinerated the nets with a burst of flame. But the distraction was all they needed. Proton and his grunts released a cloud of smoke bombs, and by the time it cleared, they had vanished into the labyrinthine corridors of the plateau. A tense silence fell. Lance landed his Dragonite, its feet thudding on the gravel. He dismounted, his cape swirling, his eyes burning with fury as he stared at Ash and Leaf, standing side by side. "Agent," he said, his voice dangerously low, addressed to Leaf. "You have broken every protocol. You are consorting with the enemy." "Sir, you have to listen," Leaf said, stepping forward, holding up the data chip. "He's not the real enemy. Giovanni is planning something, a project called Chimera. I am aware of the name." Lance cut her off, his gaze shifting to Ash. It was a look of pure, concentrated enmity. "We intercepted communications from the Cinnabar facility during its destruction. We know Giovanni is the target. That doesn't make you an ally. It makes you a rival player in the same dirty game." "Then look at the data," Ash said, his voice steady, meeting Lance's glare without wavering. "It has everything. The science, the location, the power source. Everything you need to know about the silent calamity." Lance hesitated. He looked at the chip in Leaf's hand, then at the conviction on her face. He looked at Ash, the boy he had crowned champion and who had turned out to be his greatest adversary. He was a man who trusted his gut, and his gut was telling him that the lines he had drawn in the sand were no longer so clear. "We were on our way to raid a suspected rocket communications hub in the Celadon department store," Lance said, his voice still hard. "My intelligence suggested Proton's unit would be there. It seems they fed us bad intel to draw us away from here. To ambush you. They're playing you just like they're playing me," Ash said. "We have a common enemy, Lance. Whether you like it or not." Just then, a G-man from the squadron rushed over, a communications headset pressed to his ear. "Sir. We have a situation at the Celadon department store. It's not a comms hub. It's a lab. Another one of Giovanni's. They're moving a device, something that tracks high-level psychic and geothermal energy. They're trying to get it out of the city." Lance, Ash, and Leaf all looked at each other. The device to track the calamity. Proton's ambush wasn't just to kill me, Ash realized aloud. It was a diversion. The real prize was always in Celadon. Lance's jaw tightened. He had been played. "All units," he commanded, speaking into his wrist comm, "converge on the Celadon department store. Top priority is to secure that device." He looked back at Ash, his expression a complex mixture of fury and dawning, grudging acceptance. You're coming with me. You're under my personal custody. One wrong move, and my Dragonite will burn you to a cinder. But you seem to know more about what my enemies are doing than my own intelligence division does." It wasn't an alliance. It was a temporary, tactical ceasefire. A battlefield promotion born of desperation. Ash nodded. He looked at Leaf, a silent question in his eyes. She gave a firm, determined nod in return. "Let's go," Lance said, climbing back onto his Dragonite. He gestured for another G-man to provide transport for Ash and Leaf. As they ascended into the night sky, flying toward the glittering lights of Celadon, Ash felt a strange sense of equilibrium. He was a prisoner of his greatest enemy, flying to a battle he hadn't planned, next to the one person who might have a reason to trust him. He was no longer a king in the shadows. He was a soldier on the front line of a war no one else knew was being fought. And for the first time, he wasn't fighting it alone. Chapter 7, The Descent into Silence. The device they recovered from the Celadon department store was not a weapon. It was an atlas. A strange, intricate astrolabe of silver and obsidian. It hummed with a low, resonant energy. Once activated with the data from Ash's chip, it did not show a map of the world. It projected a three-dimensional, topographical image of a single, colossal mountain, interwoven with a terrifyingly complex web of energy streams. It was a live diagram of the lifeblood of a sleeping god. They gathered in a place beyond jurisdictions, a neutral ground chosen by the only person who could command the respect of all parties, the Sinnoh champion, Cynthia. Her villa, nestled in a secluded, mist-shrouded corner of the Johto coast, became the war room for an alliance that didn't officially exist. The air in her library was thick with tension. It was a room filled with ancient texts and scrolls, smelling of old paper and quiet wisdom. Now, it held a fragile, explosive coalition. Lance stood with his arms crossed, his champion's cape feeling more like a general's mantle. Leaf was at his side, no longer a disgraced agent but a vital liaison, her presence the only reason Lance hadn't already locked Ash in a G-Men black site. And then there was Cynthia herself. She moved with a serene grace, her long blonde hair sweeping over a black coat, her gray eyes holding an ancient, scholarly depth. She studied the projected map from the astrolabe, her expression one of grim fascination. She was not just a powerful trainer, she was a preeminent scholar of the myths that underpinned their world, the stories that predated the Pokémon League, that predated even recorded history. Ash stood opposite them, a captured king on parole. Sabrina was present as a psychic projection, a shimmering, translucent figure sitting in a chair, her power a cool, observant weight in the room. Archer, representing Ash's faction of Team Rocket, stood stiffly in the corner, his discomfort at being in a room with two champions palpable. The legends speak of it, Cynthia said, her voice a soft, melodic counterpoint to the tense silence. She gestured to the mountain on the map. Empty silver. It is known as a place of savage, powerful Pokémon, a final challenge for the strongest of trainers. But the older myths, the ones from before the Silver Conference was ever established, call it by another name, the Silent Peak. The mountain that sleeps. She pointed to the nexus of energy deep within the projected mountain, a throbbing heart of pure darkness. They say it is a prison. Not for a Pokémon, not as we understand them. It is the prison for a concept. An antithesis. The world is built on the bond between humans and Pokémon, a symbiotic evolution of soul and spirit. This, she gestured to the dark heart, is the force that despises that bond. The silent calamity. An entity of pure entropy that seeks to sever the connection, to return the world to a state of silent, lonely purity. And Giovanni wants to harness it, Lance growled, his hand clenched into a fist. He wants to point a weapon of cosmic annihilation at the world and call it order. Worse, Ash said, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to him. He doesn't want to harness it. Not anymore. The data from Cinnabar, the method I used, in Lavender Town, it gave him a new idea. Subjugation through harmony. He doesn't want to chain the beast. He wants to whisper in its ear. He believes he can pacify it, reason with it, and turn its conceptual power into a tool for his new world. Cynthia's eyes widened in horror. That is a far greater madness. To fight such a being is one thing. To attempt to commune with it, is to invite it into your own soul. He would not be its master. He would become its first apostle. The room fell silent, the true, terrifying scope of Giovanni's ambition finally laid bare. This wasn't about world domination anymore. It was about theological warfare. The astrolabe shows more than just the calamity's prison, Leaf said, pointing to a series of fainter, golden lines that wove through the mountain, separate from the dark energy streams. What are these? Those are the prison bars, Cynthia explained, her gaze filled with a new, profound respect for the map. The legends speak of an ancient order, before the age of poke balls, who first confronted the calamity. They weren't trainers. They were warriors who fought alongside their Pokemon, their souls linked. They called themselves Aura Guardians. Ash felt a jolt, a shock of recognition at the name. An instinct, a memory not his own, flickered at the edge of his consciousness. They couldn't destroy the calamity, Cynthia continued. So they contained it. They wove a web of their own life force, their aura, into the very rock of the mountain, creating a cage of positive, symbiotic energy to contain the entropic darkness. These golden lines, they are the remnants of that power. A network of trials and traps, designed to keep anyone from ever reaching the heart of the mountain. A network that Giovanni is undoubtedly trying to bypass as we speak, Lance concluded grimly. We need to get there first. We need to stop him before he reaches the core. A frontal assault is impossible, Archer interjected, finding his voice. The mountain is a fortress of nature. The wild Pokemon there are said to be the most powerful on the planet, driven to hyperaggression by the calamity's influence. And now Giovanni's loyalists will have fortified the known paths. It would be a slaughter. Then we don't take a known path, Ash said. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the projected map. He was seeing it now, not just as a diagram, but as a living system. He could feel it, a faint echo of the hum he had felt from the astrolabe. He pointed to a subtle confluence of the golden aura lines, deep in a region marked on modern maps as an impassable series of glacial cliffs. Here. It's a weak point. Not in the prison, but in the defenses. A back door, left by the Guardians. Cynthia and Lance stared at the spot, then at Ash. How can you possibly know that? Lance demanded. I can feel it, Ash said simply. He couldn't explain it. The aura, the strange power he'd used in Lavender Town, was resonating with the map, with the golden lines. It was like hearing a familiar song in a language he didn't know he could speak. He could feel the intent of the Guardians, their ancient strategy laid bare to his nascent senses. Cynthia looked at him, her scholarly curiosity mixed with a dawning awe. The legends have a prophecy, she said softly. They speak of a child of the line of the one who would seek to master the calamity. A child who would inherit the ambition, but possess the heart of the Guardians. One who would be destined to stand before the calamity and either unshackle it forever, or reinforce its chains. She looked directly at Ash. The prophecy says this child would be able to hear the mountain's song. The implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Ash, the son of the man trying to unleash the calamity, was the one person with the innate ability to navigate the ancient defenses designed to contain it. He was the key. It seems destiny has a dark sense of humor, Lance muttered. Then the path is clear, Ash said, his voice firm, accepting the strange, heavy mantle of prophecy. A small, elite team. We use the Guardian's path to bypass Giovanni's forces and the mountain's primary threats. We get to the core chamber and we stop him, whatever it takes. He looked at the faces in the room. This isn't a G-Men operation or a rocket mission. It's a suicide run. I need volunteers. Lance stepped forward without hesitation. My Dragonite and I will be the vanguard. I will not stand by while the world I swore to protect is threatened. Cynthia nodded. My Garchomp and I will provide ground support. And my knowledge of the lore may be our most valuable weapon. Leaf met Ash's gaze, her expression resolute. I'm going. My team is versatile. We'll need that. Ash looked at Archer. The man hesitated, then gave a curt nod. My commander goes, I go. My Golbat can provide aerial recon in the caves. Sabrina's projection gave a serene inclination of her head. I cannot come in person. My power is needed to keep Saffron from collapsing into the chaos of your civil war. But I will provide what psychic support I can from afar. A shield for your minds against the calamity's influence. It was a fellowship of the apocalypse. 2 champions, a G-Men agent, a rocket executive, and a criminal prince, united against a common doom. Then it settled, Ash said, the weight of command settling on his shoulders once more, but this time it felt different. It was not the weight of an empire, but of a desperate hope. We leave at dusk. We're going into the heart of the storm. The air at the base of M. Silver was thin and sharp, tasting of ice and ancient stone. It was a place that felt primal, untouched by the modern world. The sheer, glacial cliffs of the western face rose before them like a wall at the end of the world, their peaks lost in a swirl of dark, angry clouds. There was no sound. No wind. No birds. Just a profound, listening silence that was more terrifying than any roar. They had been flown in by a stealth transport, a small team against a mountain. Ash, Leaf, Lance, Cynthia, and Archer stood at the base of the cliff Ash had identified, the rock face a sheer sheet of black ice and jagged stone. There's no path here, Lance stated, his Dragonite a warm, solid presence beside him. It's a dead end. The path isn't for our feet, Ash said. He closed his eyes, reaching out with that humming sense within him. He felt the golden lines of the map, and he could feel them now in the real world, a lattice of dormant energy just beneath the surface of the rock. He walked forward and placed his hand on the cliff face. The rock was colder than ice, but beneath it, he felt a faint, thrumming warmth. Here. He channeled a small pulse of his aura into the rock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft golden light traced a pattern on the cliff, a glowing seam that spiraled upward. A section of the rock then slid away with a grating sound that hadn't been heard for millennia, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel leading into the heart of the mountain. By the gods, Archer breathed, his cynicism finally failing him. The Guardian's path, Cynthia whispered in awe. It's real. They entered, one by one, into the darkness. Lance's Dragonite was too large to fit, as was Cynthia's Garchomp. We'll ascend the outer face, Lance said. If this path leads where you think it does, we'll rendezvous with you at the upper levels. Stay in contact. Ash nodded. The 5 of them, Ash, Leaf, Cynthia, and Archer, were on their own in the mountain's veins. Ash took the lead, his aura sensed the only compass they had. Pikachu was a living lantern on his shoulder, its electrically charged cheeks casting a dancing, nervous light on the tunnel walls. The tunnels were not natural caves. They were perfectly carved, the walls covered in faint, geometric patterns that seemed to absorb the light. The air was stale and cold, heavy with the weight of ages. The Pokémon here. Leaf whispered, her hand on a Pokeball. I can't feel any. It's like nothing lives in these tunnels. The Guardians built this path to be sterile, Cynthia explained, running a hand over the wall. This entire network is designed to be invisible to the wild Pokémon outside. They are repelled by the aura that saturates the rock. But they were not entirely alone. As they delved deeper, the first of the trials began. A massive, circular stone door blocked their path, covered in an intricate carving of a Lucario in a meditative pose. A lock, Archer stated. And no keyhole. Ash approached the door. He could feel the mechanism. It wasn't physical. It was spiritual. It's a test of intent, he said. The Guardians would only allow those with a pure heart to pass. He placed his hand on the carving. He didn't think about his father, or Team Rocket, or the war. He thought of Pikachu. He thought of Leaf standing with him at the plateau. He thought of the spirit of the Marowak, finally at peace. He pushed not his power, but his purpose into the door, to protect. The carving of the Lucario's eyes glowed with a soft blue light. With a deep grinding sound, the stone door rolled aside. They continued, facing more trials. A chasm that could only be crossed by a bridge of pure light that solidified under their feet when Ash focused his will. A chamber that filled with a phantom psychic energy, a projection of their deepest fears. Archer saw Giovanni's disappointed face, Cynthia saw her beloved history being erased, Leaf saw herself failing, a disgraced agent forgotten by the world. Ash saw a vision of himself sitting on his father's throne, his eyes as cold and empty as Giovanni's, with a broken Pikachu at his feet. He had to force his way through the illusion, his heart pounding, his breath catching in his throat. Each trial was a test of a different virtue, purpose, will, courage. Each one drained him, forcing him to draw deeper on an energy he barely understood. As they ascended, the golden hum of the Guardian network grew stronger. But so did the other presence. A low, subsonic vibration began to permeate the rock, a feeling of deep, cosmic dread. It was the slumbering calamity, its influence leaking through the layers of the mountain. They emerged from the tunnels into a vast, cavernous space high up in the mountain's core. They were no longer in the sterile passageways. This was a natural cave, but warped, twisted. The rock was a sickly, crystalline purple, and the air hummed with a malevolent energy. Wild Pokémon were here. Hordes of them. But they were wrong. Their eyes glowed with the same purple light as the rock, their bodies angular, their movements jerky and unnatural. Golbat, Crobat, Sandslash, their forms corrupted, turned into mindless puppets of the calamity's will. They attacked on sight, a wave of claws and fangs, their cries silent, their only impulse to destroy the living warmth that had just entered their domain. They're corrupted. Cynthia yelled, sending out her powerful Milotic. Their very nature has been overridden. The battle was frantic. Leaf's Venusaur used its vines to create barriers, her Blastoise washed them away with hydro pumps. Cynthia's Milotic moved with a dancer's grace, calming some with its beauty while striking others with powerful water pulses. Archer's Golbat fought a grim aerial duel against its corrupted brethren. Ash fought with a cold, desperate efficiency. He didn't have time for a prolonged battle. He could feel Giovanni. He was close. Close to the core. His aura, honed by the Guardian's trials, now gave him another ability. He could hear the corrupted Pokémon. He could hear the screaming, terrified consciousness of the real Pokémon trapped inside the crystalline shell of the calamity's influence. Don't fight them. You can't beat them. Ash yelled, an idea born of desperation and empathy sparking in his mind. We have to break the calamity's hold. He pushed past his allies, standing before the surging tide of corrupted Pokémon. He closed his eyes, ignoring the warnings and pleas from his friends. He reached out, not to a single spirit like the Marowak, but to the collective. He didn't offer a memory. He offered a feeling. He projected the unwavering, unconditional bond he shared with Pikachu, a beacon of pure, symbiotic loyalty. He channeled the trust he felt from Leaf at his side, the respect from Lance and Cynthia. He became a conduit for the very concept the calamity sought to destroy. Connection. Partnership. Love. The golden light of his aura erupted from him, not as a weapon, but as a wave of pure, empathic energy. It washed over the corrupted Pokémon. For a moment, they faltered. The purple glow in their eyes flickered. The crystalline shells on their bodies cracked. He could hear their real minds responding, fighting back against the parasite that controlled them. It wasn't enough to free them, but it was enough to give them pause. The mindless wave of aggression broke, the Pokémon screeching in confusion, torn between the calamity's command and the warmth of Ash's aura. In that moment of hesitation, the cavern ceiling exploded inwards. Lance, astride his Dragonite, crashed down, followed by Cynthia's Garchomp. We're here. Lance roared. We cleared the upper ridges. Their arrival was the final piece. The path was clear. This way. Ash yelled, running through the now confused horde of Pokémon. The core chamber is just ahead. They followed him, sprinting through the massive cavern, toward a final, gargantuan gate carved into the far wall. The gate was different. It was not made of stone, but of a solid, shimmering field of golden energy. The final seal. And it was already open. A man-sized hole had been violently torn through its center, the edges still sparking with his father's destructive technology. Ash's heart sank. They were too late. He ran through the opening, the others close behind. They emerged into a chamber so vast it felt like an underground sky. The walls were a swirling vortex of silent, black energy, a living void. The ground was a smooth, obsidian floor, reflecting the non-light. In the center of the chamber, a massive, intricate machine of Giovanni's design was assembled, its metal arms reaching up toward the dark heart of the vortex. It was Project Chimera, fully assembled and ready. And standing before the machine's control console, his back to them, was Giovanni. He was not alone. He was flanked by his most elite guard, including Proton and a dozen other fanatics, their bodies augmented with the same grotesque cybernetics as the creature Ash had fought in the gym. They were no longer just men. They were monsters of his father's making. Giovanni turned, a slow, triumphant movement. The scar on his temple from the cinnabar incident was a faint, white line. His face was not that of a madman. It was serene. The face of a prophet who was about to meet his God. Ash, he said, his voice calm, echoing in the profound silence of the chamber. You have arrived just in time. To witness the dawn of a new age. He turned back to the console and placed his hand on the primary activation panel. Let there be order. Chapter 8, The air and the void. The silence in the chamber was a presence, a weight that pressed in on them. It drank sound, devoured light. Giovanni's calm, terrible words did not echo, they were simply absorbed by the hungry void that writhed on the cavern walls. He pressed his hand to the activation panel, and the machine at the heart of the room, Project Chimera, whirred to life. It was not a loud, mechanical roar. It was a hum that resonated not in the ears, but in the bones, a vibration that seemed to pull at the very fabric of their being. A beam of pure, refined energy, a fusion of psychic resonance, geothermal power, and the stolen grief of 1,000 spirits, lanced from the machine's apex into the swirling darkness above. Stop him. Lance's voice was a thunderclap, a defiant roar against the encroaching silence. He and his dragonite became a blur of motion, a streak of orange and blue charging toward Giovanni. The response was immediate and brutal. Giovanni's augmented guard, his Praetorian, moved to intercept. Their cybernetic limbs whirred, their eyes glowed with malevolent red light. They were faster and stronger than any human. A plasma bolt from Proton's arm cannon slammed into Dragonite's chest, sending the powerful Pokémon staggering back with a roar of pain. The chamber erupted into a maelstrom of desperate battle. Cynthia's Garchomp tore into the Praetorian guard, its dragon claws clashing against metallic limbs with showers of sparks. Leaf's Blastoise and Venusaur fought back-to-back, a coordinated defense of water and nature against the unnatural horrors. Archer and his Crobat engaged in a deadly aerial duel with rocket-propelled grunts, the cavern filled with the silent flashes of their attacks. It was a battle of heroes and monsters at the end of the world. And it was a prelude. Ash ignored the chaos. His eyes were locked on his father. This was not a battle to be won with Pokémon. It was an argument to be settled. He broke into a sprint, his path a direct line to the humming machine. Pikachu was a yellow streak on his shoulder, its body crackling with furious, untamed electricity. Sabrina's psychic voice, a lifeline from the world above, echoed in their minds. The machine is not a weapon. It's a key. He's using its harmonizing frequency to shatter the final lock on the Calamity's prison. He thinks he can greet it like a friend. Giovanni turned from the console, a serene, placid smile on his face as Ash charged toward him. You see, my son, he said, his voice almost conversational over the din of battle. You sought to lead with loyalty. A noble, flawed ideal. I lead with vision. I am giving this broken, chaotic world the one thing it truly needs: silence. You're giving it death. Ash yelled, launching himself over a twisted piece of rock. Giovanni met his charge not with a Pokémon, but with his own two hands. He moved with a speed and precision that belied his age, his body honed by the same ruthless training he had inflicted upon his son. He caught Ash's arm, twisting it, using his own momentum against him. They were no longer just father and son, or rival commanders. They were two sides of the same coin, locked in a desperate, physical struggle for the fate of reality. Death is just a change of state, Giovanni said, his grip like iron. This is an evolution. A purification. The bond you cherish, the love between man and beast, it is an impurity. An emotional cancer that breeds chaos. The calamity will cure it. The hum from Project Chimera reached a fever pitch. The beam of energy pulsed, and the swirling void above them shuddered. A crack appeared. Not a physical crack, but a fissure in reality itself, a line of absolute nothingness that began to spread across the dark vortex. And then, the calamity awoke. It did not erupt with a roar. It did not appear as a monstrous beast. It was a wave. A silent, unstoppable wave of pure entropy that washed over the chamber. Color bled from the world, the vibrant orange of Dragonite's scales turning to a dull, lifeless gray. The flash of Pikachu's electricity became a weak, pale flicker. The very concept of sound was erased, the psychic clash of the battle turning into a silent, frantic pantomime. The calamity was not a creature to be fought. It was a fundamental rule of the universe being rewritten. It was the great unmaking. The wave of entropy washed over the combatants. Giovanni's Praetorian Guard, their bodies a fusion of man and machine, simply stopped. The life in them, the spark of their humanity and the energy of their mechanics, was unwritten. They froze in place, their red eyes dimming, before crumbling into a fine, gray dust that scattered into nothingness. The wild Pokémon that Ash had pacified, their minds still torn, were the next to go. The calamity's influence reclaimed them, their bodies crystallizing into inert, purple statues before they too dissolved. The heroes' Pokémon fought back. Their bond with their trainers was a shield, a flickering candle of warmth against the absolute cold. But the entropy was a poison. Cynthia's Garchomp cried out in silence, a crystalline lesion appearing on its side, spreading like frost. Leaf's Venusaur wilted, its vibrant flower turning to brittle, gray stone. Giovanni watched, his serene smile finally faltering, replaced by a look of profound disbelief. He had expected a being. A god to be reasoned with, to be persuaded. He did not expect the universe to simply start turning itself off. He held up his hand, as if to command it, to greet it. The entropic wave touched him. And Giovanni, the man who would be a god, the visionary of absolute order, simply ceased to be. There was no scream, no flash of light. His form just faded. His suit, his ambition, his very existence, were erased from the world like a line of chalk in the rain. His last expression was not of fear, but of utter, complete surprise. The world was ending. And Ash was standing at its heart. The entropy washed over him, but it did not unmake him. The aura within him, the legacy of the Guardians, flared to life, a shield of golden light that held the void at bay. He was an anomaly, a pocket of defiant life in the face of absolute null. He looked around at the silent, desperate battle, at his friends and their Pokémon being slowly, inexorably erased. He looked at the place where his father had been. He had won. The tyrant was gone. And his victory meant nothing. Pikachu shrieked, a silent cry of agony, as a spot of gray appeared on the tip of its tail. The calamity was beginning to erode even their bond. In that moment of absolute despair, Ash understood. He saw the full picture. The Guardians hadn't fought the calamity. They hadn't imprisoned it. The prison wasn't a cage to hold something in. It was a balance. A dam built of life and connection to hold back an ocean of nothingness. And his father had just dynamited it. He couldn't destroy it. You couldn't kill a concept. You couldn't punch a void. But he remembered the prophecy. Heir to the ambition, heart of the guardian. He was destined to either unshackle it or reinforce its chains. He looked at Pikachu, at the fading light in its eyes. He looked at Leaf, her face a mask of terror as she held her wilting Venusaur. He knew what he had to do. He turned his back on the battle. He walked toward the epicenter of the void, toward the silent, screaming heart of the great unmaking. Ash, no. Leaf's voice, a desperate, silent thought, reached him through their shared terror. He didn't look back. He strode into the heart of the entropy, his own aura the only thing keeping him from being unwritten. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his soul, his very essence. And he did the one thing the calamity could never expect. The one thing it could not comprehend. He embraced it. He did not fight the void. He became a part of it. He let the absolute cold, the utter silence, the profound loneliness wash into him. And into that void, he poured everything he was. He poured in the memory of a defiant Pikachu in a lab, a spark of rebellion. He poured in the image of a Charizard raised on trust, not fear. He poured in the shared pain of the Marowak, and the moment of its peace. He channeled the courage of Lance, the wisdom of Cynthia, the fierce loyalty of Leaf. He reached out with his mind, his aura a beacon, and he gathered the flickering embers of the bonds from every one of his friends, every one of their Pokémon. He fed the calamity a symphony of connection. The love of a trainer for their partner. The trust of a friend. The pain of loss. The joy of victory. The fierce, stubborn, illogical warmth of life itself. The calamity, a being of pure, lonely silence, reeled. It was like force-feeding a starving man a royal banquet. It was too much. It was a paradox. How could there be such warmth in a universe of cold, hard rules? How could there be such noise in the perfect silence? It was a battle of concepts, fought in the space of a nanosecond and an eternity. Ash's soul against the void. He felt his own memories begin to fray, his sense of self eroding under the immense pressure. But the bond with Pikachu was his anchor. It was a pure, unwavering line of light in the absolute darkness. It was the first connection, the strongest one, and it held him together. He didn't win by force. He won by showing the calamity the one thing it was not. He showed it a universe that was not silent, but sang with a billion different voices, a billion different bonds. He did not destroy the calamity. He gave it something to listen to. Slowly, painfully, the wave of entropy receded. The color bled back into the world. The gray on Pikachu's tail vanished, replaced by vibrant yellow. The crystalline lesions on Garchomp healed. The wilting flower on Venusaur's back regained its lush, pink hue. The sound came back, a rush of air and the panting breaths of the survivors. The great, swirling void on the cavern walls collapsed in on itself, retreating back into the prison at the mountain's heart. But this time, the prison was different. It was sealed not just by the fading aura of the ancient guardians, but by a new, brilliant golden light. A light that pulsed with the beat of Ash's own heart. He had not just restored the prison. He had become its warden. He had woven his own life force into the chains. The battle was over. Ash collapsed to his knees, the world swimming back into focus. He was exhausted, not in his body, but in his soul. He felt thinner. As if a part of him now existed outside of himself, forever standing guard against the silence. The survivors gathered around him. Lance, Cynthia, Leaf, Archer. Their faces were a mixture of awe, relief, and profound concern. They were bruised, battered, but they were alive. Giovanni's remaining technology lay in ruins. His Praetorian Guard was dust. It was over. Days later, Ash stood on the peak of M. Silver, the world spread out beneath him. The air was clean and sharp. The sun was warm on his face. The silence here was no longer a threat. It was peaceful. He was changed. He could still feel the calamity, a distant, sleeping hum deep beneath his feet. He could feel his own aura, a part of the mountain itself, a constant, vigilant watch. He was forever tied to this place. Footsteps approached on the snow-dusted rock. It was Leaf. She came and stood beside him, not speaking, simply sharing the view. "They're calling you a hero," she said finally, her voice soft. "The official story is classified. But the truth is leaking out. The G-men who survived, Cynthia, Lance, they've told the other champions. They know what you did." "I'm not a hero," Ash said, his voice quiet. "I just cleaned up my own family's mess." "What will you do now?" she asked. "Team Rocket is shattered. Archer is helping the League dismantle what's left. Sabrina has declared Saffron an independent, neutral city-state. You're a free man, Ash. For the first time in your life." He looked out at the horizon, at the endless expanse of the world he had just saved. He was free, but he was also tethered. A warden to a silent god. He was no longer a prince, no longer a commander, no longer a villain or a champion. He was just Ash. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I'll finally travel. See the world. Not as a conqueror or a fugitive. Just to see it." He looked at her, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "And you? Back to being the G-men's star agent?" She shook her head, a smile of her own playing on her lips. "I resigned. I told Lance I work better as a consultant. My methods are too unorthodox for the G-men." Her eyes twinkled. "Besides, I hear there's a certain warden of a mythical mountain who might need someone to make sure he doesn't get too lonely." He felt that unfamiliar warmth bloom in his chest again, chasing away the last of the cosmic chill. He reached out, and his hand found hers. Her fingers laced with his, a simple, solid connection. A bond. Pikachu, who had been sitting quietly on a nearby rock, scampered over and leaped onto his shoulder, nuzzling his cheek. "Pikachu," it chirped, its voice bright and full of promise. He stood there, on the roof of the world, between the woman who had seen the hero in him and the partner who had been his anchor in the void. He had no empire, no title, no grand destiny left to fulfill. He had only the road ahead, a world saved from silence, and a future he could finally write for himself. And for the first time, it felt like more than enough. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.